Hey, what's going on, everyone? And I am here today for my first installment in what is going to be a multi-part series of my light novel breakdowns of Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom. If you saw my review of the Sacred Kingdom movie that I posted a few days ago, you would know that I have decided that I'm going to have to make this a multi-part series. Number one, the movie's just way too long to cover in one video, and number two, there's just a lot to say about what was not only omitted, but also what was shown. There's extras there that I want to elaborate on as well. And so the way I've decided to break it up is based on the amount of light novel that's covered in certain sections of the movie. That's what I figured would be the most efficient way. I should also mention that Volume 13 is substantially longer than Volume 12, so Volume 13 will probably receive more content on it than Volume 12 will. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the breakdown, starting with the Volume 12 content, which is the start of the Robo Holy Kingdom arc. Okay, one more quick thing before I really start. I have this tick where I still call it the Robo Holy Kingdom, even though the translation is the Robo Sacred Kingdom. That's like the official translation. It is in the light novel too, but the first time I heard the name was Robo Holy Kingdom, so that's the one that's stuck in my mind. So if I call it that, just know that's what I'm referring to, what they translate as the Sacred Kingdom. Okay, so the first scene of the movie actually shows us a little bit of a map. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to show clips. I don't think I will be able to show clips of the movie, so you're just going to have to imagine what I'm saying. Sorry. And it's a narration of Albedo kind of explaining a little bit about the Robo Holy Kingdom, and that's pretty much exactly how Volume 12 starts. Multi-page description of the Robo Holy Kingdom, because we had never seen it, or there had been no story up to this point in the light novels. Really what we learn about it is its general layout, where it is, how it's a peninsula off to the southwest of the Riestes Kingdom. According to what they describe it in the light novel, it's shaped like a sideways horseshoe. Because of that, it's divided by north and south, which is mentioned several times, not only in the light novel but in the movie as well. And then we get into that first scene on the Great Wall. And the Great Wall is that infrastructure that separates the border of the Robo Holy Kingdom from the neighboring Abelion Hills. And we open up on these two characters. The first character that we get described in the light novel is Orlando. He is that guy, that knight-looking guy in the armor that we see in the movie. And then we meet Pavel Baraha, which is Nea's father. I should say in the movie, this scene seems to take place like in the late afternoon, like the sun hasn't set yet, whereas in the light novel it's already the middle of the night, which is why Pavel is replacing Orlando, because Pavel is able to see better in the dark, with his ranger skills. In the light novel we get a lot more background information on Orlando and Pavel. Typical Overlord for you. It gives you so much information about a character and then just kills him. In the movie they don't really do any of that. They skip over most of the conversation that takes place between Pavel and Orlando. In light novel, through their conversation, we learn that Orlando and Pavel are both members of an organization called Nine Colors. And Nine Colors is regarded as the strongest group of warriors in the Robo Holy Kingdom, and they are given designations in the form of colors. Pavel's color is the black, I believe. I don't think Orlando's color is ever said. I might be wrong on that if anyone knows. And just as a fun fact, Remedios, who we definitely becomes a major character later on, she is also a member of Nine Colors, and she is the white. Pavel and Orlando have a big long talk in the light novel, and this is something that was shown in the movie, but it's definitely comes out more in the light novel, is that Pavel loves talking about his daughter Nea. He is a very doting father. Orlando is always if he thinks Pavel is upset or something, he just brings up Nea, and it just completely shifts Pavel's mood, and he's just immediately happy and starts talking about everything that Nea is doing and just rants and rants and rants. And another thing is that we see this in the movie. Pavel looks at this doll that was wrapped around, he wore it as a necklace. It was something that Nea had carved for him when she was 6 years old, and he just kept it the whole time. So once again, just showing that he is a completely doting father, and also that him and Nea have a good relationship. Another thing that's mentioned briefly is that they have learned that Gazev Stronov was killed by Ainz, and because of this, Orlando is thinking about going on a pilgrimage to the Sorcerer Kingdom, like fighting is basically Orlando's only thing. He's similar to Remedios in that way, and he's actually a lower rank in the army because he like refuses to take orders. He doesn't do well with authority figures, but because he's so strong, he still keeps his position as a member of Nine Colors. So really everything that happens once Demiurge shows up is about the same. So whenever Demiurge drops that meteor on the gate, which kills Pablo, it's from Pablo's point of view at this point in the light novel, and all he's doing is thinking about Nea and her future and how like, oh, she went down the path of a paladin because she wants to be like her mom, because Nea's mom was a paladin. Oh, but Nea's more like me, she's got better skills as a ranger, I want to teach her stuff, we should go camping again. It's a little more of a tragic scene in the light novel because we're getting all of Pablo's like inner thoughts, and the only thing he's thinking about is his family. But then Demiurge drops the meteor, and then we switch over to Demiurge's point of view, and this is where we get some more information on Demiurge. He just starts evaluating himself. We learn that the spell he used was a 10th tier spell called Meteor Fall. It's actually one of only 2 10th tier spells that Demiurge knows. Demiurge is kind of a jack of all trades build, which obviously isn't optimal. Anyone that plays RPGs could tell you that trying to spec into everything is not a optimal way to play the game. And so Demiurge doesn't have much magic skills, especially in the higher tiers. Most of Demiurge's strength comes from his skills. That's where his real power is. And also in terms of pure combat ability, he rates himself as like one of the weaker guardians. He even says that like about himself. But to Demiurge, fighting shouldn't even take place unless you're 100% positive you're going to win. So Demiurge basically views his intelligence as a weapon, which is true. Now that he's alive, his intelligence is very, very dangerous to anyone. So that is true, even if his pure combat abilities are lower than someone like Cocytus or Mare, who are specialists. So then in the movie, we immediately cut from the assault on the Great Wall to the battle in Kalishna, I think is what it is. And this was a really weird transition in the movie because like we don't know how much time has passed, we don't know what's going on. It just immediately cuts to Kalishna and Remedios riding a horse and cutting down demons. We don't know what the hell's going on really. But in the light novel, it's clearly explained that several days go by after the assault on the Great Wall, and then we're over in Kalishna, which is their fortress city in the north. There's a whole scene that's omitted between Kellart, Calca, and Remedios. This whole scene is basically to introduce to the audience, these are the characters and these are why these people are important, as opposed to, you know, in the movie where these people just show up and we don't know shit about them. That's why I said that the early parts of the movie are super awkward. I was so happy I'd read the light novel because I was like, who are these people and why do I care if I haven't read the light novel? So as I said, we learned a lot about these 3 women in this scene together. We learned that they were childhood friends growing up. We also learned a little bit about the political situation in the Robo Holy Kingdom and kind of how it's a little delicate and weird. I also need to make a correction to my review. In my review, I complained that there was a mistranslation and that they always called Calca the Sacred Princess, and also that Demiurge called her the Holy King, which I thought was weird. So that's actually not wrong. I guess I forgot this. Basically, in the light novel, it's explained that they call her Holy Lady Calca or Holy Majesty Calca because the southern nobles were like refusing to like completely change the title for Calca because it was controversial for Calca to become the ruling monarch because she's a woman. So basically, she has received the title of Holy King, but as a woman, they don't have, like, they wanted to change the title a little bit for her, so they call her the Holy Lady or the Holy Majesty Calca. I guess another translation of that would be Sacred Princess. So Crunchyroll did that right. I was wrong. I have to take that back. It's a little minute detail. I just forgot it, but I'm man enough to admit my own mistakes here. The light novel gives a lot more context as to like how delicate the political situation is in the Robo Holy Kingdom. And actually a minor thing that has come up is that because all of them are unmarried and don't really like hang around men very much, the southern nobles have accused Calca of having some sort of relationship with these 2 sisters. Calca's been facing a lot of political turmoil, and then this war happens. So it's not a great situation for her. We have that whole scene in the light novel, and then someone comes in and is just like, hey, Yaldabaoth's here, and that's when everyone rides out and goes to battle, and that's the scene that's cut to in the movie. Overall, the fight in Kalishna is somewhat accurate. It's a bit longer in In the light novel, there's like more exchanges and stuff. We get more info on Remedios and like how like her skills and powers, the strongest paladin in the kingdom, and you know, it just explains more of that. But overall, that scene's mostly the same. I will say the club scene in the movie, it's worse in the light novel. It's still pretty bad in the movie, but it's even worse in the light novel because like when when Wrath picks her up, and basically for the first time he shakes her, and it like causes her legs to bend in the wrong direction. Also, the movie, they like when Wrath is about to pick her up, they cut away to the scene with Nea in the fog and stuff, and then they show it later what happened with Kalka. The whole scene completes uninterrupted in the light novel. The scene ends in the light novel after another meteor is dropped on Kalishna. We don't know how Remedios really survived that. We don't know. It's just everything just ends right there. And that's where the scene in Kalishna ends. And in the movie, it immediately transitions to some indeterminate time later. And this is where we're introduced to Nea in the movie. And there's a group of paladins with Remedios, and they're on their way to the Sorcerer Kingdom, but they're in this fog. That is not what happens in the light novel. In the light novel, it then transitions to some indeterminate time later, but they're not in the Sorcerer Kingdom. They are in Riestes. And this is a whole section, and it's a large section of the book that was completely chopped out of the movie. So the reason they went to Riestes is pretty logical. Riestes is the closest kingdom to the Robo Holy Kingdom. It's the easiest to access, and they were asking them for military aid. This is where we're introduced to Nea, and she's been sent around to meet with certain nobles to ask for their help. However, it's not been very successful for them because all the nobles are still recovering from the disaster of the Kotz Plains in Volume 9. And it's something that Nea comments on as they're going around Riestes, is the general sense of gloom that they're feeling, that she feels from the people of Riestes. She's saying like even compared to the Sacred Kingdom, like the people in Riestes look miserable. Also, something that was moved around is that there's a couple of scenes in the movie that take place like after they've arrived at the Sorcerer Kingdom that in the light novel take place when they're Riestes. And those scenes are like the ones kind of showing the dynamic between Nea and Remedios. And Remedios is just constantly getting on Nea's ass. Things that Nea can't fix, Remedios is still pissed off that like Nea isn't just fixing the problem. Like Nea comes back from her meeting with Noble, and the Noble said like, yeah, we can't help you, and Remedios is just like, oh, are you sure you tried your hardest? Like, are you sure you're not just a bad negotiator or something? And like in this part of the story, she is just always on Nea's ass for everything. You see that dynamic even more in the light novel than you see it in the movie. Because of the rank difference though, Nea just has to sit there and take it, and you can, in this part of the story, Nea's internal dialogue is there, and you're hearing like her frustration with the situation. She notes that Remedios used to be like pretty generous and easygoing, but the stuff that happened with Kalka and Kellart going missing and stuff, basically what Nea explains is that the personality we see for the remainder of the movie and light novel, it wasn't always like that. Remedios wasn't always such an asshole. And actually, apparently, Maruyama modeled Remedios after one of his old bosses, which I think is absolutely hilarious. And then we move on to another scene in the light novel that was also completely removed from the movie. Once again, this is a large scene. This is like 30 pages scene here. It's where the Robo Holy Kingdom gang meets with Blue Roses. And the reason they want to meet with Blue Roses is because they know that Blue Roses has encountered Yaldabaoth before. This is back in season 2 of the anime, and so they want more information that they can provide. This scene is just them talking, Remedios and the Robo Holy gang asking questions and them answering it. I do recall one funny scene is basically that Evil Eye attempts to draw Yaldabaoth to confirm like, oh, is this the person you saw? And Nea looks at the drawing and she says it looks like a childish scribbling, and like no one can even like make out anything on it. And Tia takes it and just immediately tears it up and then draws a much better picture and is like, this is who we're actually looking for here. I just thought that was funny because it reminded me of Bleach and Rukia and Rukia's like childish drawings. I just thought it was funny. And another funny thing with Evil Eye is that during the conversation, she's like so monotone and almost seems like disinterested in what's going on. And then as soon as they ask about Momon, she immediately brightens up, and like Nea comments that like even though she can't see her face, she can tell that Evil Eye is blushing, and like her voice rises in pitch and she starts speaking faster like, oh yes, Sir Momon, the greatness. And they actually also ask Blue Roses if they can come and help out against the demi-human army and Yaldabaoth, but they say no. Gargaron and Tia are still weak from the resurrection, and also we can't fight fight Yaldabaoth, he's too strong. And this is where they basically pose to the Robo Holy Gang, oh, if you want to like talk to Momon, you're gonna have to talk to the king, the Sorcerer King Ainzul Gon, because Momon serves him. One more thing, there's a little bit of New World lore that's dropped in this conversation that I thought was a little neat. Basically, Nea asks Evil Eye if it's possible that Yaldabaoth is a demon from history that's going under a different name. Evil Eye explains that that's impossible because for the New World, demons and angels, their names are inherently tied to how they can incarnate, I guess. Like, they can't incarnate unless their names have made, like, they describe it as a wedge in the world. Like, basically their existence is inherently tied to their names. However, Demiurge is a demon, but he's not from this world, so those rules don't apply to him. But I just thought that was a neat little tidbit of like them thinking in terms of their own lore and how these Nazarick people, they're all like basically aliens that are like defying the logic of their universe, which I think is very interesting. So then we move on to them traveling to the Sorcerer Kingdom, and there was another small scene before the fog sets in that was completely cut from the movie, and this scene is just explaining more of Nea's mood, and she also like thinks about her father a lot. It's more character building for our main New World person in this arc, and she thinks about her father and she almost cries, and how like frustrated she is with Remedios. Oh, Remedios is mad because her sister and her friend, the princess, are like missing and presumed dead, but Nea in her mind is like, so what? My parents are also probably dead, but that doesn't give me an excuse to like lash out at people just because, you know, I'm upset. And so it's explaining her mood a bit more and how frustrated she is at the current situation she's in. And so now, finally, after I'm done filling in the blanks for 10 minutes, we then have that scene with the ghost ship that passes through. I should say this was not explained in the light novel either. It's just the ship comes in, it passes through, and we're just, even light novel readers were sitting there like, what the fuck was that? I just found this out like last week, but as it turns out that Maruyama released a bonus volume, and it was kind of released as a promotion with like advanced screenings of the Robo Holy Kingdom movie, I guess. It explains why the ghost ship is there, apparently. I haven't read it. I that's what I heard though, is that this like whole bonus volume revolves around the ghost ship, and it's only about 100 pages. It's like a small thing. It's not even really a full volume, but that was released like 2 months ago in Japan. So I don't know if it will come to the West, since the other bonus volume didn't come to the West, so maybe it won't, but we'll see. I don't really know much about the ghost ship stuff because that's not explained in the light novel either. So and then they approach the gates of the Sorcerer Kingdom. So something that's shown in the light novel is that frost giants are actually tending to those statues we see, and that's a reference to the events of volume 11 that weren't in the anime either. In the anime of season 4, they didn't talk about the frost giants at all, but the frost dragons that we see in the anime and in the volume 11 stuff were in conflict in the Azalezia Mountains with the frost giants. So this shows us that the frost giants have been brought under heel of the Sorcerer Kingdom, as well as Hegemon and the other frost dragons. So in the movie they get let right in, and then they get talked to by the, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but that Naga creature. In the light novel it's a little more complicated. In the light novel they're basically directed by a guard to dismount, and they go into like this room that's like inside the gate. They're like, you have to receive a lecture first about like what the city, like what's going on in the city. This is where they explain like, look, tons of different races live in this city. You might see some undead walking around. Please do not attack the undead. If you draw your weapons in aggression, you will get killed. There's a scene actually where a Death Knight walks into the room, and every one of the Robo Holy Gang immediately like, you know, get ready to attack, and the guard is like, no, don't attack, I can't see it again. So apparently what's happened before is that someone attacked the Death Knight as soon as it showed up, and the Death Knight killed that person, and that like traumatized the guard, and the guard's like, I can't take it, don't let me see that again. So the Robo Holy Gang, they don't like this one bit. Because their whole doctrine preaches against the undead, but they're desperate, so they decide to go along with it. And this is where they meet the Naga creature as well. I can't pronounce their name, I'm not even going to try. And one little tidbit I thought was neat is that the Naga mentions that the Sorcerer Kingdom uses mind control magic to investigate crimes. So like if any of you guys commit crimes, like we will use mind control magic to find out. All the Robo Holy Kingdom people view this as like unethical. Dominate or charm arm. Like, they can make anyone do anything. Like, you can turn a normal person into a criminal immediately with a spell like that. So they're just it's viewed as just like unreliable, and like if you can just make anyone say anything. So like, why would you even trust that stuff to begin with? I thought that was a neat, like, kind of just like, here are the standards for this world that Ainz does not view as like standards for himself, which is, it's a nice cultural comparison there. And so another scene that is cut from the movie is the walk up to the meeting with Albedo. They show this a little bit in the movie, is like, you know, they're walking through and they see everyone's happy, no one really seems disgruntled, things seem safe, but like there's undead walking around, which is freaking them out. But like, you know, the citizens don't seem unhappy. As a matter of fact, they mention that the citizens of the Sorcerer Kingdom seem to be a lot more happy than the citizens of the Riestes Kingdom do. And there's a small scene where they come upon some dwarves that are doing maintenance on the road. The slums have been turned into an area for demi-humans to live, and they've even built like custom houses, or like have edited the houses to make them more comfortable for people that are on average smaller than humans to live in. And also the dwarves mentioned that a lot of the surrounding villages and also in the city itself use undead as a labor force, and this is something that the Robo Holy Gang immediately like lift up their eyes at. But the dwarves are like, no, it's great. Like undead don't need to eat or sleep, and they don't get tired. Like they're really good as a labor force. They explain like the economic impact of using undead labor is just letting them get done with everything faster, because the undead don't have to stop. They can just keep doing work like endlessly, and they understand language, they can take orders, and this is like something that the whole Robo Holy Gang takes a minute to wrap their head around. But it was an interesting thing explaining more of what is exactly going on in the Sorcerer Kingdom. And then we ride up to scheduling the meeting with Ainz. And I'm sure some of you must be thinking, you have been running your mouth this whole time and you've only gotten through the first 3 scenes of the movie? Like, what the hell, man? But believe it or not, guys, that is literally exactly the halfway point of volume 12. Yes, guys, they were able to get through half a fucking volume, about 130 pages worth of stuff, in about 15 minutes of movie time. It's actually insane, and that's why I was so critical of the first part of the movie, because this is the part of the movie where so much is chopped up, moved around, switched around, taken out. It is absolutely awkward and weird. You can like tell when something's unnatural, or like the transitions are unnatural, and so that's why I had to spend so much time talking about barely any content of the movie, is because so much was omitted from this first part of the movie. And I get it, because other than the battle in Klishna, like everything is just exposition and explaining and getting people on their way towards the area. So yeah, it's just easier to plop the guys in the place where they are already going to go, instead of taking the time of transitioning them. But you lose so much context of what's happening when that happens, and that's why like I thought this beginning part of the movie was so weird. So I know I haven't covered that much of the movie at this point, but yeah, that's literally half of volume 12. So I feel like I've covered enough for one video, because that's 130 pages of the light novel. And what's crazy is that there's still plenty of omissions in the second half of the book as well. So we'll see how that works when I make the video on the next part of volume 12. So with that being said, let's go ahead and continue on with the volume 12 content. Picking up right where we left off, the next scene in the movie that's shown, Robo Holy Kingdom gang actually going into the throne room and meeting Ainz for the first time. Now, I actually thought this scene was really cool in the movie, because it's Ainz's first appearance in the movie, and they made it like super dramatic. There's like a slow shot of him like on screen, and we hear the Nazarick theme. It's booming in the theater. It was a really cool moment. However, in the movie, right after Ainz is shown, they immediately cut away to some time later. I bet people that didn't even read the light novel could tell you that this was chopped up. Yeah, in the light novel, they actually show like the full meeting with Ainz and the Robo Holy Kingdom gang. So basically what the meeting boils down to is the Robo Holy gang are asking Ainz if he can lend them Momon to help deal with Yaldabaoth. And at first, Ainz says no. And the reason he gives for that is that, oh, oh, Momon is integral to getting the people in my kingdom to accept the new status quo, and so I need him here in order to stabilize my own kingdom, so I can't loan him out to you. Meridius and Gustav aren't cool with that, so they keep like kind of probing him for hoping he'll be a little more lenient on that. Ainz first agrees, okay, I'll send him to you after 5 years, and then after an even more probing, he's like, okay, I'll send him to you after 3 years. To them, that's like a super long time. Like that's like the Robo Holy Kingdom would probably be destroyed by the end of that time period. Remedios and Gustav are about to give up, but then Nea jumps in, and Remedios is pissed about Nea jumping in because of her rank, but Nea's just like, please, you have to do better than that. Like 3 years is not good enough. Because of Nea's request, Ainz actually lowers it down to 2 years, so she actually cut the time down by a third. Nea is like shocked that Ainz even like listened to her, because you know she's just a squire and he's a king, and like there's a very big status difference between the two of them. I also feel like I should mention that pretty much the remainder of this volume is from Nea's perspective. That kind of is reflected in the movie as well. Like almost 90% of the movie is from Nea's perspective, which I thought was a smart choice. I should also say that during this scene, we can tell from Nea's like inner thoughts that she's already very interested in Ainz. The way he presents himself, his aura, just like all of his like things, the way he talks, Nea is just hyper focused on those things, and she's just getting vibes from him. So she's already very, very interested in the Sorcerer King just from this first meeting. So the meeting ends shortly thereafter, and we jump ahead to sometime later, and Remedios is giving Nea a lashing for talking out of turn, and we see that in the movie too, but in this scene in the light novel, we get a note from Nea about how much Remedios has changed. Once again, this has come up before, compared to how she was before all the stuff with Yaldabaoth went down. The next scene where Ainz shows up in front of Nea and like requests to meet with Remedios and Gustav, and the whole meeting scene, that's pretty much exactly the same that was shown in the movie. The only difference I could point out is that in the movie they actually show us that the maids were in that fight in Kalishna, and then Ainz in the movie is just like, I want those maids, and that's like his like justification for going. Whereas in the light novel, the maids actually didn't show up in Kalishna, so when Ainz mentions the maids in their meeting, Remedios is like, no, I didn't see these maids that you're talking about. They heard about them from Blue Roses, but since they cut the meeting with Blue Roses out of the movie, they obviously like were like, okay, let's put the maids like earlier in so they can know what we're talking about here. This next scene was divided a little differently in the movie compared to how it is in the light novel. So the next scene in the movie and the light novel is this conversation between Ainz and Nea in their carriage on their way to the Robo Holy Kingdom. However, in the movie, they like kind of cut this conversation in half and moved the second half to the conversation like later down the line, compared to where it's all just one big scene in the light novel. In the movie, the scene stops when Ainz asks about her family, and then it cuts to some time ahead when they actually arrive at their headquarters. Whereas in the light novel, it actually shows us the conversation. Nea explains her family, and like, oh, I wanted to be a paladin because my mom was one, but I don't really have good sword skills. I'm good with the bow. And those things all come up in the movie as well later on, but they just kind of reordered them, I guess. And also something that happens in the carriage in the light novel is that's when Ainz gives her the bow. And we actually get this really cute picture of Nea. You can see how scared, she's nervous she is about this whole thing. She's like, holy crap. And also this scene is longer in the light novel because it really explains how much Nea is starting to respect Ainz just from the way he treats her and the way he talks to her and the things he says. And she's already starting to think a lot of him and admire him already this early on. And really just from how kind Ainz is being to her is really just a big thing for her, and something she keeps thinking on is like, oh my gosh, he's this great king and he's just so kind and smart. It's a bit more of a gradual increase because we get so much of her inner dialogue and we see her growing feelings for Ainz like just so much more in the light novel as opposed to the movie because we get that inner dialogue. So then the scene shifts to the meeting in the caves we see in the movie. That is pretty much exactly the same. I don't really have much to say on that. This scene is basically just Ainz saying like, yes, I'm not going to take command. And I feel like in the light novel though, from the way the dialogue is like written, I feel like it's shown a little bit more that Ainz doesn't really want to take command, because there's always like these brief pauses where Ainz is like, yes, anyway, about that. Because it's all from Nea's point of view, we don't get like that for sure, but like that feeling is there a little bit more in the light novel just from the way the dialogue is written, which I thought was a little funny. So a scene that's cut out in the movie is Ainz then leaves the meeting and everyone else in the Robo Holy Kingdom gang stays. This is where a bunch of the people start asking Nea like about the bow that she got. And I feel like I should also explain the bow. The bow is an Yggdrasil item, and Ainz claims it was made with the rune technology of the dwarves. Now there are runes on that bow, but it wasn't made with the rune technology of the New World. It just has cosmetic runes from Yggdrasil. Runes from Yggdrasil were just cosmetics. They didn't like enhance the power at all, as opposed to like the New World runes, which actually like do something. But he's claiming that it is made with the rune technology, which links into the events of the previous novel, because in volume 11, that's when he got all the dwarven runesmiths. So he's just trying to promote the fact that he now has a panoply on rune technology, and like he's trying to hype that up, which becomes a running gag later on in the arc. So yeah, all these people are asking Nea about the bow, which is exactly what Ainz wants, but Nea views it as like such a valuable treasure that she's like, no, like you can't look at it because like His Majesty trusted me with this. I can't just show it willy-nilly. And Nea's reluctance to talk about the runes and everything about the bow is also a running gag that is, you know, pretty much for the remainder of this arc. And then in this scene, they also finalize their plan, which is they are going to attack prison camps that have been set up throughout the north of the Robo Holy Kingdom, and they're going to basically free the prisoners at these camps and also like raid them for supplies and armaments that they'll then equip their freed prisoners, and then they'll fight with the rest of the army that they got. And then there's a smaller scene that's also cut where Ainz meets with Gustav and Nea after the meeting, and this scene really is just showing how comfortable Nea is becoming around Ainz and how like easy she talks to him and things like that, and is more showing her growing admiration for Ainz. So then in the movie and the light novel, the next scene we get is that first battle scene. In the movie, this is all one long scene. There's a scene where they attack the gate, and then, you know, there's the hostage situation, and then they move into the city, and we have that square off with the Bullfolk King. It's all one location, one city, one big scene here. Whereas in the light novel, what actually happens is that the first scene that we see in the movie, that's actually a different location, and then several days pass, and then the second half happens at a different location. So basically what the movie did is they took the events that happened over the course of several days in the light novel and in different locations in the light novel and made them all happen at one time and one place. So the movie also skips a dialogue scene between Nea and Ainz, because Ainz is basically waiting on the outside of this battlefield because he said he wouldn't like take command or whatever. And an interesting thought that Nea has during this conversation is that she gets the sense that Ainz used to be human, and because of how comfortable she is around him and how easy he is to talk to, she gets the sense that he used to be a regular person because of the way he just acts and stuff. And she hit the nail right on the head, because he did used to be a regular guy, now is in this, you know, undead body and has been thrust into this role. I feel that's interesting because that's how comfortable Nea has become around Ainz, because it started off with he's this mighty undead, he's scary and everything, and now she's thinking like, are you it's hard to imagine you as an undead because you seem so human. That's like how much she has grown comfortable with Ainz over the course of these, like, I think it's like 2 weeks in the light novel. So then the battle starts, and this is shown in the movie pretty accurately. The one thing that changes in the movie is the scene where the Bufolk, which is the goat people, they're called Bufolk. And in the movie, the Bufolk guy holds up a hostage, and everyone, all the Robo Holy gang, all back up. And then Ainz comes in and is just like, no, and he blows up the gate. Whereas in the light novel, it's a bit worse. What happens in the light novel is the Bufolk person holds up a hostage child, and Remedios is like, oh crap, okay, everyone stop, we're pulling back. And then what the Bufolk person does in response to this is he kills the hostage he's currently holding, and Remedios is freaking out like, what the hell, we did what you said. And he's like, yeah, I got another one. So if you don't want that to happen, keep doing what you're doing. And this is where Ainz steps in and realizes, like, okay, yeah, this is bad. If the demi-humans realize that hostages are gonna work to this extent, then nothing will happen, and like, we're all screwed if we don't actually do something here. And so that's when Ainz comes in and is just like, okay, I have to settle this, and he blows up the gate by sending a fireball at it. And Remedios doesn't like this one bit, because her whole thing is about living up to the ideals of the Holy Lady, and like, oh, this is not what Her Majesty would want, we have to try and protect everyone, And Ainz basically counters with that, like, that's just not possible. And he's just like, there's no way you are getting out of this situation with 0 deaths. It's just not going to happen. He basically comes in with that cold logic, and then they move into the city, and we have that whole thing with the father, and the father finding the child, and Ainz admitting, like, yes, I'm the one who killed him. And he has this whole speech about power. It's a pretty dramatic scene in the movie too. I quite liked it. And the scene in the movie is pretty accurate to light novel. I don't really have anything to say as far as cut content. But as for the scene itself, I always get the feeling that Ainz was referring to basically how things were for him when he started playing Yggdrasil versus now. Because Ainz has said several times that when he started playing Yggdrasil, he got PK'd and robbed so much that he almost quit playing the game, and the only reason he didn't was because Touch Me helped him out. And so I think that's what he was referring to when he's just like, yes, if I didn't have power, I would get everything taken away from me. He mentions under his breath when the conversation is, he's like, that's why I will never stop in the pursuit of power. I have to assume there is someone stronger than me out there. And when he says that, I was always getting the vibe that he's referring to other players. He's very scared of that, because Ainz has said several times in the story at this point that he doesn't view himself as like a top tier like PvP character. He said he puts himself at the top of middle class. So I got the feeling in this scene that like his biggest fear is a PvP optimized monster finding him and killing him. And so why he's so obsessed with getting sources of strength is to prepare against something like that. So yeah, a little bit of a deep dive into Ainz's dialogue there. There's also a scene in the light novel where Gustav has talked to some of the prisoners, and the prisoners mentioned that several people had been skinned. And at this point, Ainz knows about how Demiurge has been using the skin of a Belion sheep to make parchment for Nazareth. It's kind of a funny scene in the light novel because Ainz is like, oh yes, yeah, I have no idea what that could be about. He is very obviously lying about that, but I guess they can't tell because he's an undead, which is one of the many times Ainz's undead nature has come in handy for hiding his emotions. Now, like I said, in the light novel, several days pass, and then we get another battle where the additional scenes that are shown in the movie actually take place instead of the one scene. So a second battle happens in the light novel, and once again, hostages are used on Remedios and the Robo Holy Gang, and Remedios immediately capitulates and it's just like, okay, we're retreating, we're pulling back. And at this point, Ainz is getting annoyed. He's just like, come on guys, like we've already done this song and dance. I thought I explained it to you. So once again, he comes in and talks to Remedios and it's just like, hey, we can't do this if you keep like pulling back every time a hostage gets pulled up. And Remedios is pissed, and she actually tells Ainz to shut up. She gets so mad, and Nea is like, what the hell, like how could you talk to him like that? And Ainz is just like, look, you have your pretty ideals and that's fine, but if you don't have the strength to make your ideals a reality, all they are is wishful thinking. We have to live in the real world here, and we have to come up with a solution that is actually possible to achieve. And this is the scene where Nea finally like fully accepts Ainz's reasoning. Before, she was basically on the fence because she thought Remedios was right for wanting to save everyone, but she also thought that Ainz was right for saying like, okay, this is the actual realistic thing to do here. And so Nea was kind of conflicted. She was like, what is truly the right way? What is justice? And which is a theme of this whole arc for her. And this is the scene where she really starts to accept Ainz's reasoning. You can wish for things to be better all you want, but unless you actually have the ability to make it happen, there's no point to him at all. And that's the reality that Nea accepts for herself, like in this scene. So then Ainz does the same thing. He blows up the gate with a fireball, and then he releases the high wraiths, which we see in the movie. And the wraiths give off fear status, and so they're basically freezing all the boo folk throughout the city as they run around. Ainz is like, okay, I'm gonna go in, and Nea's like, oh, I'm coming with you. So he gives her a charm that will resist fear status. And something that was cut from the movie is while they're walking in, Bufolk that's gone berserk attacks Ainz, and what Ainz does is he grabs it with his bare hands, he grabs its head, and he just crushes his head in his bare hands. Super, super metal, and I was disappointed it was cut out of the movie. I was like, oh man, that's super hardcore. So they move to the center of the city, and that's when they run into Buser. And Buser is the king of the Bufolk tribe. He's called the Mighty King Buser. And this was super disappointing in the movie, because in the movie, this entire battle fight scene is cut out, and I thought that was super lame, because it's not a super long fight. I really don't think it would have taken that much extra effort to put this in there. And number two is they used Buser, and also the scene where Ainz pulls out his sword and is walking towards Buser, they used that as like a promotional stuff. Like they've put him in the trailers and stuff. He's literally in the movie for like 20 seconds. But yeah, in the movie, all that happens is he shows up, he introduces himself, and then it cuts away, and Ainz has won and taken all of his items. So what happens is Ainz actually pulls out a sword, and he decides to fight Buser physically for a while, which shocks Nea because she knows Ainz is a magic caster. So they exchange blows a few times, and then Ainz pulls out a halberd. And this scene is actually illustrated in the light novel. We do get some cool art here. So as you can see, this is the picture that is included at the beginning of the light novel. We can see Buser there and Ainz holding his halberd. It's pretty awesome. And something that Buser actually is a specialist in is he focuses on weapon breaking. That's like something he's very known for, is breaking his opponent's weapons. So he tries to do this to Ainz's halberd while they're fighting, but it doesn't work. And Buser's just like, how did this not work? Weapons made out of magic are supposed to be fragile. But Ainz is like, bro, I'm the fucking sorcerer king. Everything I make is metal as hell. So Buser starts freaking out because he's like, okay, this might have been a mistake here. And then Ainz takes off his ring. We see the effects of this actually in season 3 of the anime fight with Foresight when Ainz took off his ring. Ring kind of suppresses his aura, I guess. And when he takes the ring off, Nea mentions like how she could feel like the air, like it's a physical sensation when Ainz actually unleashes his aura, I guess. And this is when Buser really starts needing to pull out his brown pants. He immediately gives up once he realizes like how truly powerful Ainz is, and he's just like, stop, I will give you my items, I'll give you my knowledge on Yaldabaoth's army, please spare my life. And Ainz is like, yeah, true, that would be useful. But then he comments on the skulls that Buser is wearing, and we see this pointed out in the movie as well. Now in the light novel, it's explicitly pointed out that these are children's skulls that Buser is wearing, and so Ainz is like, I don't think Pistonia and Negretto would care to serve next to someone like you because of like how badly you treat children, so I'm just gonna kill you now. And then Buser's like, wait, but Ainz just pulls out an insta-death spell and immediately kills Buser, and everything's over after that. And even Nea says to herself like she couldn't believe like how quickly it all ended, and so she's shocked because this is her true like viewing for the first time of Ainz actually like showing how far above he is from like the creatures in the new world. So Ainz takes all of his items and he's like looking them over and he's like, yes, this is interesting, yes. And Nea says she thinks it's a little cute actually, like how interested Ainz is in items and like his collector side, I guess. She views it and is like, she almost thinks it's adorable, which I guess shows Nea's like switching mindset, because like at the beginning of this volume there is no way she would have ever thought an undead was cute in any way, and yet now she's viewing Ainz like kind of obsessing over magic items and she thinks it's cute. And that's pretty much where we pick up back in the movie. So guys, the runtime is getting pretty long here, so I think we'll end it off there. We covered about another 100 pages of volume 12. We are almost to the end of the volume 12 content, so next time I hope to wrap up volume 12 and also start the volume 13 content. At this point in the movie, I think we were like maybe 35 minutes in. It was astounding to me how quickly they were able to blow through a volume almost. Like I think we got like maybe like 40 pages left of volume 12 before we get into volume 13. It was not a long time before they got through volume 12 in the movie. It was crazy. So in this section of the movie, the only huge omission I would say is the Buser fight. The other omissions mainly come from smaller scenes between Ainz and Nea, and there's just more of those, which aren't integral to the plot, but they add a little something because Nea is the main character of this arc, really. So guys, this was right after Ainz defeated the mighty King Buser in that city, and the next scene in the movie after Ainz defeats the mighty king, it jumps to him discovering the orcs and the whole scene talking with the orcs. In the light novel before that, there's a small scene where Ainz and Nea are investigating the HQ. Ainz and Nea stumble upon a room where a lot of it looked like a torture room from the way it was described in the light novel. And there's a document on the table, and Ainz actually uses his monocle, the monocle that translates documents. He's used it several times in the anime. This document details experiments that were done on humans in the city by demons, and they actually find a room with victims of these experiments. They don't go into the specifics of like what exactly the experiments were, but we do get detailed of like people that are like kind of cut up and stuff. Like it's very, very gruesome. They cut that entirely from the anime, but that scene basically showed you that the demons, not the demi-humans, were they kind of had their own agenda going on. Then we get to the meeting with the orcs, and that meeting is mostly the same. We get a little more background information on the orcs in the light novel. That's really the only main difference. You know, we learned that the orcs are like one of the very few tribes of demi-humans that like completely refused to work with Demiurge Yaldabaoth. And we also learn a little bit about their culture and how orcs are actually, contrary to popular belief, they are a species that very heavily emphasizes cleanliness, which is kind of, I guess, a counterintuitive to their appearance, which is of pigs. And also they explain like a little bit more of their culture, like how their standards of beauty are like completely different from humans, and like people that humans consider beautiful are considered hideous by orc standards. It's kind of like they're basically, their beauty standards are like the complete inverse of humans in the new world. So we get a little more information on like just them as a species, but for the most part that scene is the same, with Ainz basically recruiting them, and that becomes a thing later on. And then the next scene in the movie is meeting Caspond, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's going on during these scenes, because it's all from Nea's point of view, and it's a lot of her inner dialogue that we're getting. As has been the case with Nea, basically the entire volume, she is just constantly admiring Ainz. Noticeably, at this part of the light novel, the admiration is getting even more intense. Like she is just constantly ranting about how great Ainz is. It hasn't gotten to like a fanatical point yet. Her respect for him is now like almost overshadowing all the other feelings she has like in her life. So then we have the meeting with Caspond, and where Ainz and Caspond meet. We see this in the movie as well. Caspond is Kalka's older brother. He actually passed up on the throne, and that's why Kalka was able to inherit. But because of his existence, that kind of created a political controversy in the Holy Kingdom, because normally the throne is supposed to go to a man. Agnatic primogeniture, I believe, is that an inherent structure that from like actual real life, and that kind of caused a lot of the political turmoil that Kalka was dealing with prior to this invasion. So Caspond is a pretty important political figure. He's like, I believe, the only living member of the royal family left. Remedios is like kind of determined that Kalka's still alive. We haven't confirmed Kalka's death, but a lot of other people in the country, you know, are basically going off the assumption that Kalka is dead. So he's a very important figure. And so when we have that meeting with Ainz, you know, that is basically he's basically the de facto head of the Robo Holy Kingdom, meeting with Ainz there. And actually during this meeting with Ainz, that this is something, this is kind of a note that comes up later, but it's very early foreshadowed here in this conversation in the light novel. They removed this from the movie, but Ainz asks several times to several different people throughout this whole conversation if anyone can see through illusion. While you're reading it during this section of the light novel, you're wondering why he's asking about that, you know, like, because this is all from Nea's point of view. He basically makes up some kind of an excuse of like, oh, I've heard demons can mask their appearances and like they could like infiltrate us or something like that. Him asking those questions is important because of a scene that happens after the meeting with Caspond that was cut out of the movie. I'm gonna come back to Remedios and Gustav meeting with Caspond, but I want to talk about this first. After the scene with Caspond, Remedios, and Gustav, we cut to a scene where Ainz is alone. It's from Ainz's point of view. One of the few times in this volume that's like a significant section is from Ainz's point of view. And Ainz is basically chilling in his room, and then a doppelganger, who we know can shapeshift, comes into the room and reports to Ainz. And what's interesting is at this point in the light novel, we don't get any description as to what this doppelganger looks like. It's just, Ainz just refers to him as the doppelganger, and the doppelganger says, oh, I apologize for what I said before, and Ainz is like, oh, it's okay, it's part of the plan, don't worry about it. We don't know who this doppelganger is, but we know it's someone that has been interacting with Ainz in the Robo Holy Kingdom, and that's why Ainz was asking so much on who can see through illusions. Can any of you guys see through illusions? Is because there is a doppelganger amongst people, like there. And so that was kind of an interesting tie-in to like Nea's point of view, hearing Ainz say something, and we make mental notes of it, and then it comes back later in a later scene. That was very interesting. If you've seen the movie, you already know about the reveal of that, so this shouldn't be a surprise, but I'm gonna save that talking about more in depth of that until we get to when it's actually revealed who the doppelganger is. But like, it's interesting because like in the movie, the doppelganger's presence isn't even revealed until the very, very end of the movie, whereas in the light novels, there's already been breadcrumbs dropped here that there is a doppelganger that is serving Ainz in this group of people. And speaking of interesting things, now going back to the meeting between Caspond, Gustav, and Remedios, this was after Ainz left. And one of the most interesting things that was omitted from the anime was during this scene where they're talking about strategies for the upcoming fight, they discuss the types of demi-humans that make up the demi-human army, breaking down the species and subspecies of demi-humans in the demi-human army. It's super interesting. I'm going to give a very brief description of all the species that they mentioned in Volume 12. So they start off by saying that there's 12 large tribes, and by large they mean in terms of numbers. So we have snake men, who I don't think require any explanation. They're anthropomorphic snakes. We have armats, which are bipedal rat people, which is a nightmare for people like me that don't like rats. Armats are said to be a relative of Quagua, which we see in the Volume 11 stuff. And also snake men, like the Armats, are relatives of lizard men, which is another demi-human race that we've already seen previously. So basically, there are relatives of the demi-human races that we focused on previously in the Overlord story that are in this army, which I just thought that was an interesting tie-in there. Then we have the Caven, which are basically apes, and they're large apes though, and they're larger than humans, and they also don't have eyes. And then we have the Zarin, who become major players in the later part of Volume 13, and they are basically eel demi-humans, and a lot of people actually thought that they're called grotesques, so heteromorphs in the Yggdrasil terms, but no, they're actually demi-humans, but a lot of people thought that they were heteromorphs like at the beginning. And then we have bladers, which are insect demi-humans that have blades coming out of their hands or something like that. A nightmare fuel for any insectophobes out there. And like the Zarin, people thought that they were grotesque, but they're classified as demi-humans because spells that target demi-humans affect bladers. So that's why they're classified as demi-humans, despite their very, very heteromorphic appearance. Then we have Horerunners, which are, they have horse legs, but I don't think they're centaurs, because centaurs are classified differently. They have 2 legs, but those 2 legs are horse legs, so they can just run really far. They're known for their sprinting capabilities and their endurance, but so I don't think it's like a centaur who has 4, like basically the entire lower half of their body is a horse. It's just that they have 2 legs that are horse legs. That's what I believe that they're called. And then we have the Spidon, who are spider demi-humans, and they have 4 arms, and they can make thread. You know, so basically we have Spider-Man up in here. Spider-Man is canon in Overlord. Okay, and then we have Stone Eaters, and their appearance isn't actually described, but they're called Stone Eaters because they eat rocks and they can spit them, and they're almost like bullets. Like they can dent armor with how strong they can spit rocks, and that's why they're called Stone Eaters, but their appearance actually isn't described, unlike the other demi-humans at this point. And then there's Orthruses, who are half carnivorous beasts. Then there's Magiroses, who, like the Stone Eaters, their appearance is not described really, but they're just magic wielding, and apparently the magic they can use shows up as tattoos on their body. And then there's Terrapuses, which I believe we see in the anime specifically as well, basically pterodactyl people, and they can fly to a limited extent. They're more gliding. And then we have the Boofolk, which we saw a considerable amount of in the previous part. And then there's even more detail because there's 6 other groups that aren't like very large. They tend to not live in large groups, but they're still categorized as different species. So we have ogres, which I don't believe need any explanation. We've seen ogres a lot. Then we have the Priam, which are similar to ogres in appearance, but they have the power to control earth. And then there's also the Va'am, which are basically Priam, but they have water powers instead of earth powers. Then we have Naga Rajas, which are different from Nagas. Apparently, though they are similar in appearance, they actually are completely different species and they don't like each other. Then there's Spriggans, which once again, their appearance is not described, but they're described as having the ability to change their size at will, and there isn't a lot of evil ones. Apparently, they're more mischief makers than like bad. Like evil aligned Spriggans are considered very rare. And then we have the Zeusia, which have the upper bodies of beastmen and the lower bodies of carnivorous beasts. And that details all the races in the demi-human army. Oh my gosh. It seemed like crazy the amount of time that they just took to explain this thing. And detail the races. It's amazing how complex the world can be, you know? And so after the meeting with Caspond and Remedios and Gustav, it then goes to that meeting with Ainz that I already explained. And in that meeting with Ainz, after the doppelganger shows up, the doppelganger then talks about Demiurge's plan and the plan and everything. And Ainz, of course, has no idea what the plan is. This is where we hear Ainz's inner dialogue about the plan and how frustrated he is at Demiurge, because Demiurge didn't give him a whole lot of instructions, because Demiurge was just kind of like, do what you believe is best, Lord Ainz, you know, because you can't make a wrong decision. And Ainz is, of course, freaking out internally, just like, oh my god, I wish I knew, I want detailed instructions here. The doppelganger shows up and asks Ainz in the next phase of the plan, who should be spared? Is there anyone that you want in particular that you want spared in the next phase of the plan? We also get a little inner dialogue about Ainz viewing Nea and like thinking about Nea. He says that he thinks Nea hates him because of Nea's eyes and like just because of how her face is and how intense her glare is, apparently, that he thinks that she hates him, when in truth it's the complete opposite, which I just think is hilarious. And so when Ainz is asked who should be spared, or is there anyone you want spared, he's so worried about giving the wrong answer here that he just immediately jumps to, oh, don't worry about it, you don't have to spare anyone. And that's the last line of volume 12 is, you know, all these events, all these things from Nea's point of view, thinking how great the Sorcerer King is, how wonderful he is, how merciful he is, and then we get this scene with, oh yeah, don't worry about it, you don't have to spare anyone. I do think that leaving that out of the movie was a good decision. I do kind of like how for the Overlord movie, if you hadn't seen any of Overlord before watching this movie, you would kind of view Ainz as like a savior. So like when you're watching the movie, you know, everything is from Nea's point of view. If you hadn't watched the previous part of the series, like you wouldn't know Ainz is in on this thing until way late into the movie. It comes as like a big reveal. So I don't criticize the removal of the Ainz point of view scenes because it kind of masks or misdirects the audience a little bit as to Ainz's actual involvement in what's going on if you hadn't seen the previous part of the anime, which I found out that they did actually make this movie. They wanted to make it so people that hadn't seen the Overlord series could watch it, which I just find funny because it's so late into the story. Hey, to each their own, and it sounded like a lot of people actually were surprised at Ainz's involvement in like everything that happened with the Roll Behold the Kingdom if they hadn't watched the Overlord series, which I think was a really nice change of pace for the movie. That wraps up volume 12. That completes volume 12, and then we go right into volume 13. So here's volume 13, guys, and volume 13, I believe at the time of its release, was the longest single volume of Overlord. Not counting like the, you know, post like content and all that stuff. It's like 370 pages, so it's almost 400 pages, which is considerably longer than a lot of the other volumes. Most of the volumes average around 300 pages. Really, most of them are more like between 250 and 300. So this one being like almost 400 is substantially longer than like pretty much all the other volumes preceding it. So I understand why they went through volume 12 so fast. I mean, guys, the past this up to this point in the video, and also my past 2 videos, was all of volume 12. We are at like the 40-45 minute mark in the movie. So they got through this shit fast as fuck. I understand that because volume 13 is so big and massive, and so much shit happens in this volume that giving the lion's share of the movie to volume 13, that makes sense. So I don't fault them for that decision. I do have to say though, that definitely shows in the quality difference, I believe, in the movie. As soon as we get into the 13 stuff is when I think the movie really found its footing. It really doesn't slow down at all. Like, it's just bam, 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 events, and it's just all these good things happening one after another. So it's kind of weird because like when I was watching it, I didn't think the first third was bad, but retroactively, the last 2/3 of this movie, which is the volume 13 stuff, is so much better. It felt so much better than the first third. It makes me retroactively think the first third is bad comparatively. I feel like the runtime of the video is going on too much because of the end of volume 12 being so dramatic and specific and detailed and stuff. But I'm going to end this video by talking about some of the beginning setup of volume 13. Volume 13 opens up on a meeting between the leaders of the separate demi-human tribes. So it's the demi-human coalition leadership meeting is what it takes place in the beginning scene of volume 13. And we see this scene exactly in the movie as well. I really liked seeing the designs of the demi-human leadership for some of the leaders that we don't actually see pictures of in the light novel. The meeting between the demi-humans is relatively the same. What we get in the light novel is really more details on how the coalition really works. We get that vibe a little bit in the movie, but it's explained better. We get more context on how special these individuals are amongst their races and why they were chosen as the leaders of their species, of their tribes. They all have special abilities, or they all have some sort of special power amongst their species. Another thing that's detailed in the light novel is that a lot of the time, the demi-human tribes, they're just fighting amongst each other. They don't band together and invade the Robo Holy Kingdom. Like, it's happened before, but not on this scale, because the demi-human tribes, a lot of them hate each other, and they really don't get along. The only reason they're even able to operate as a coalition in the first place is because of how strong Demiurge is, and he's basically using the fear of him to unite them. We get a lot more of those inner tribe dynamics in the light novel, which I thought was interesting. And something that is cut out of the anime is that at the end of the meeting, they decide, in order to make people more scared, more kind of psychologically torment the people that they're laying under siege, they have human prisoners, and several of the species that make up this army do eat humans. Some of them don't, but many of them do. And so they decide, in order to affect morale of the defending army, they're going to take out human prisoners and just eat them alive in front of the city, like in full view of the city, which is insane.
That is delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
I guess even in a movie format, we couldn't show that stuff. The next scene cuts to like a couple days later, and it's from Nea's point of view, and she mentions like how she can't get the image of people being eaten out of her mind. So in the light novel, they don't show it either. They don't like describe it, but like they say like what happened a little bit, and so it's insane. It's crazy. This war brutal tactics here. And the next scene takes us to the prep work before we get into the siege battle, the big battle scene of the movie. But I am going to save that for next time. Honestly, guys, I thought I could cover more in this video, but I guess there's the latter part of volume 12 is so detailed and so intricate, and there's a lot of little things to talk about, that this ran on for much longer than I thought it would. I am probably going to go on break until the new year, so we will start the new year with a bang by covering the biggest battle scene in the entire movie, one which I loved. I really enjoyed it. I said that in my review of the movie. It was wonderful. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this cut content breakdown. I know there was a lot of me just talking about the demi-human army, but that's just how detailed Maruyama gets with this stuff. Like, there is no reason to know that. Like, it really doesn't come into the plot at all, but he just wants to build the world. He wants you to know how diverse this army is. He wants you to know the inner working. You could just have a nameless, army of demi-human people, and that would work as a plot device. But he takes the effort to describe like the inner politics and the inner species makeup of the army for no reason other than just to build his world better. Also, I like comparing how the narrative flows in the light novel versus the movie based on the information that they chose to omit in the movie, which I do think actually had a narrative reason for those omissions as well, not just for time reason. It has kind of softened my opinion on, like, as watching this movie as a non-Overlord person, how your experience can be different than someone who has been a longtime fan of the series and knows what's going on. That's interesting. So last time we left off right after the introduction of the demi-human leadership for the Coalition Army. So in the movie, they kind of move through this introductory scene pretty quick. They do focus on Nea, which is exactly what happens in the book. There's a lot more detail given to things that are happening around Nea during this scene, whereas in the movie, it's just completely focused on Nea. So starting off in the movie and the book, there's a scene that shows us that Ainz gave Nea Buzer's equipment. And not only does Ainz give her Buzer's armor, which actually magically changes size to fit its wearer because it is magic armor, he also gives her 3 other items from his personal stock. Number 1 is the Crown of Psychic Defense, which is kind of self-explanatory, but it protects against sort of mental attacks. However, there's a catch with that because it doesn't prevent those status. It only prevents those statuses through magic. It doesn't prevent them through abilities, and also that it prevents positive mental effects as well. So an example is the Underdefined Flag spell, which they use a lot in this arc, which basically boosts morale. So it would not have any effect on Nea because of that crown. The second is the Archer's Gauntlets, which apparently Ainz had, but he stopped using the type of magic that it enhances. It apparently enhances shooting effects, but he stopped using it, so it was just like languishing in storage. So he's just like, okay, someone can get some use out of this. Here you go. And the third one, I can't remember the name exactly, but it's a necklace that casts a spell called Heavy Recovery, and it uses the user's own mana to cast the spell. However, it requires way more mana than it would be if you were a spellcaster using it, and so Nea could probably only use it once by her estimation. But Ainz gives her all this equipment, and she's completely shitting bricks at this point. She's like, oh my gosh, you can't give me this stuff, Your Majesty, and he's just like, oh no, of course, like, you please take it. It's important for you to have this stuff. But this is, of course, just further enhancing Ainz's image in Nea's mind, which has basically been happening every time Ainz does anything in this arc of the story. So there's actually another scene that takes place before the battle. It's between Remedios and Gustav, and they talk about the rising support from the people for Ainz and how that's kind of a problem, basically affecting the authority of the Paladins, who are representatives of the royal family, because the people are so reliant, have become so reliant on Ainz, and they are putting their faith in Ainz and not in actually the representatives of their own country, which is becoming a huge problem. Ainz declared to Remedios and Gustav privately that he will not participate in the coming battle. Actually, Remedios and Gustav are so worried about how the people will react to that news that they decide not to tell them. So we're back with Nea now, and there's a funny thing that's going on as Nea's going to her position. She's getting accosted by a few people from around the city. She's actually becoming well known amongst the populace because she's always near Ainz, and she has like a personal relationship with him at this point. They think she's actually from the Sorcerer Kingdom, and they call her like, oh, there's that lady from the Sorcerer Kingdom. Oh, it's Lady Baraha. And so she has gained the respect and admiration of the people just from her proximity to Ainz. And she's just like, what is going on? Like, I'm not from the Sorcerer Kingdom. Like, what are these people talking about? But like, that just goes to show more Ainz effect that he's had on just the local population. And this was cut from the movie, but as she's getting in position, she has this conversation with the Paladin. She tries to talk about Ainz, and he like cuts her off, and he keeps cutting her off whenever she tries to talk about Ainz. So, and they don't really elaborate on why that exactly is, but it's implied that this person was basically sent there by Remedios to kind of watch out for Nea and like, don't let Nea like talk more about the Sorcerer King because we have to hide his involvement and everything like that. They never explicitly state this, but I had a theory that Remedios posted her there because she wanted Nea to die. How invested Nea had become in the Sorcerer King at this point, and also how the people viewed Nea as like a representative of the Sorcerer Kingdom, even though she's not. It was reflecting badly on Remedios, and I have a theory that's why they put her there in the first place. It was showed she would die. So then the battle is about to start, and actually a small thing is that in the book, the battle is described as taking place in the middle of winter. It's supposed to be winter, and there's like snow, and it's cold. They don't really do anything about the movie with that. It just looks like a normal day in the movie. But in the book, it's supposed to be winter. That's not really important, but it's a difference, so why leave it out? In her mind, Nea has resigned herself that she's probably not going to survive this battle. That is showing you Nea's mindset going into this battle. So then the battle kicks off, and the movie does a pretty good job here. I don't really have a whole lot to say in terms of the cut content, because there isn't really much in this section. I do have to say one thing about how the movie structured it versus how the book does. So in the movie, what happens is that it shows the initial confrontation on Nea's side of the fight. In the middle of that, it cuts away to Remedios, and then it shows the whole scene with Remedios and everything that goes down with her. And then it cuts back to Nea, and then it finishes out Nea's scene, and then it continues on from there. Whereas in the book, Nea's scene completes uninterrupted. We do not cut away to Remedios until Nea's scene has completed, and then we go to Remedios, that completes, and then we go back to Nea. The fighting is already over by the time we cut back to Nea in the book. I'll comment more on that later, but I did want to make that clear that the book has it structured a tad bit different. So the battle kicks off, and the Roboholy Kingdom is actually in a fairly good fortified position, so basically the whole battle starts with ranged attacks on both sides. We have, archers coming in, they're throwing rocks and everything, and also the angels that they're sending out in order to drop rocks on the demi-humans, and also the paladins are casting Under Divine Flag on all the soldiers to boost the morale. And then the human shields come out, which they show in the movie as well. And this is where Nea basically fully adopts Ainz's ideology that he expounded in the previous parts. Everyone basically kind of hesitates when the human shields start coming out, and everyone doesn't know what to do, but then demi-humans are getting closer, and Nea makes the first move. She takes out an arrow and shoots both the hostage and the demi-human. Just starts trying to inspire these soldiers, like, hey guys, we can't save them, they're already gone, we have to fight to protect the people that we can protect. We can't save them. And one by one, the soldiers start realizing, okay, this is the move, this is what we have to do. We all hate it, we don't like it, but it's what we have to do. I viewed this scene as Nea trying to emulate Ainz, who she respects so much. It's hard for her, but she has realized that Ainz's thinking is correct, and that in wartime, very difficult decisions like this need to be made in order for any sort of progress to be made. So at this point in the movie, we then cut away from Nea and go to Remedios, but I'm going to follow the book format here and finish out Nea's scene. So the battle continues on for a little while, but the demi-humans start breaking through and they climb the walls. It goes down to close quarters combat here. And Nea is putting up a pretty good fight. And she even notices like how strong her arrows are, and oh, they're going through armor. And this actually came up in one of my Q&As, is what exactly the bow does. And the bow is called Ultimate Shooting Star Super. While the bow itself doesn't actually have rune power like Ainz says it does seem to have actually some sort of stat boosting effect on Nea, because she notes that she feels a little stronger when she's holding it. And that's shown in Nea's ability to completely pierce through armor with her arrows, which she notes she wouldn't normally be able to do. And the demi-humans are all attacking her, and they show this in the movie too, but the demi-humans start commenting on the fact that, oh, she's wearing the armor, like she's wearing Buser's armor. This must be the person who killed Buser. So they're all kind of afraid of her. They're intimidated by her. And there's a scene where a demi-human comes in and kills one of the commanding paladins and is like, I've killed the commander. He's trying to affect their morale. But then Nea immediately kills him and does the same thing. She shouts out, I've killed the guy that killed the commander. And that's when she starts getting a lot of attention from the demi-humans. However, eventually she is overwhelmed. And in this scene, it was really dramatic in the book, but it was also really dramatic in the movie. It's basically, she thinks about her family and she thinks about like happy times, and the last thing she thinks is, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And then in the book it just says, and with that Nea Baraha died. And that's where the scene ends in the book. Like I said, in the movie they show her death after the scene with Remedios, but in the book Nea dies, and then there's a whole section with the whole thing with Remedios happening. And to me personally, I think it might have had more of an impact in the movie if they had actually shown Nea's death before the scenes with Remedios. In the movie, Nea dies and then immediately gets resurrected. But I think it might have had more of a misdirecting effect if they showed Nea's, death, and then 10 minutes of movie goes by, and the whole time the audience that hasn't read the book is just like, what the heck? Nea was the main character. Like, what's going on? I think it would have had maybe a little more pronounced misdirecting effect if they had done it that way, like it did in the book. But then we cut to the scene with Remedios. So in the movie, they go right into the action pretty quick. In the book, there's kind of a little tiny scene before the fight with just Remedios' inner thoughts. And really what this scene does is show you how incompetent really Remedios is in terms of anything except fighting. Her plan is to literally just kill 10,000 demi-humans one at a time. That is her plan. And she also thinks about Ainz versus Yaldabaoth, and it's showing more of her negative feelings towards Ainz. It's just like, is he even really that strong? Like he hasn't even shown us like how strong he is really. Like, can he actually fight Yaldabaoth? I don't know. And the whole scene, she's just throwing shade at Ainz, just in her mind. But then the fighting kicks off with her, and the three commanders immediately show up. And a lot of the inner dialogue, which provides a lot of context here, is valuable in the light novel, because Remedios looks at these three commanding demi-humans here, and she immediately can tell that these guys are really strong. And we actually get a little thought from Remedios that she is more intimidated by a demi-human that is actually skilled and has practiced versus like a brute force demi-human, because demi-humans have just naturally physically superior bodies to humans. So if they're able to harness that and have trained even a little bit as a warrior, they're gonna be better than humans that have put in much more time just because of their physical superiority. And so that's why she's intimidated by demi-humans that have trained substantially as warriors. And she doesn't elaborate on this, but she has a small thought where she thinks about, in her past, she fought against a demi-human that had training as a warrior, and she got impaled in that fight, and it brings back like bad memories for her. So then we meet the three demi-human leaders here. We have Vahar, who is the Zushia, and then we have Harisha, who is the Kaven, I believe. And then we have Nazarene, who's the Magiros. And they are actually all known by the Robo Holy Kingdom. When Harisha and Nazarene introduce themselves, they all have nicknames for them. Harisha is called the White Elder because he has super long white hair. Nazarene is called Elemental Storm because of her magic capabilities. Bahar isn't known because he only recently inherited his title and position from his father, who is well known amongst the Robo Holy Kingdom. And his nickname is Vicious Claw, which he inherited from his father. And they shorten this scene in the movie, but in the light novel, there's a substantial scene before the fighting actually starts, where the commanders show up and they just start talking. And they also talk to Remedios a little bit too. They have like just kind of this funny conversation, really. They're like the Three Stooges. Like Nazarene makes a comment like, "Oh, could I fight Remedios? Because I want her sword." Vahar's like, "No, I get to fight Remedios." And then Harisha makes a comment like, "Oh, you're just trying to give the holy sword to Yaldabaoth because you want to have his kid." And she's like, "Of course, if I have his kid, he's gonna show preferential treatment to my tribe." They're just having this kind of conversation amongst each other and arguing amongst each other. And Remedios is just watching this, and she's actually getting pissed off. She's like, "Could you guys take this more seriously? Like, this is a life or death thing. Why are we having this conversation right now?" And it's just kind of funny because it's this aside in this really serious battle scene here. And this actually goes back to a point I made earlier in my previous video about the dynamic between the tribes, because Remedios has a thought where she's like, if she just stood there and did nothing, the three of them might start killing each other because they don't get along. That goes back to the point I made earlier in that the demi-human tribes, a lot of them do not like each other and don't get along with each other, and the only reason they're cooperating is because of Yaldabaoth. So then the fighting starts, and Remedios made a strategic decision by challenging Vahar first, because she does a quick analysis of of all three of the fighters, and she thinks because she has higher magic defense that she could take Nazarene, as well as the fact that because Harisha is a monk, that she would have like stat advantages against those two types of fighters. She thinks Vahar is going to be the most difficult to defeat, and so that's why she wants to fight Vahar first. And she also takes advantage of the fact that Vahar wants a 1v1, and is basically just like, okay, can you guys distract or fight against the other two? I will take Vahar. Mentally, she even notes like, oh, it's very unlikely that those other paladins are going to be able to defeat those two, but if they can just buy enough time for me to defeat Vahar, I can then defeat them. Unlike everything else, Mourinho's actually does have tactical know-how when it comes to fighting. So the actual fighting part, the movie did pretty well. I just have a few comments to make. The book kind of glosses over it too. They're just like, oh, they exchanged, oh, there was some cuts here and there, and then just, it's kind of more broad. It doesn't get into super specifics as to what's going on with the fight. Remedios then notes in her mind, she hears people falling, and she looks over and Harisha and Nazarene have already killed their opponents. She was like, oh crap, like these guys are either way stronger than I thought, or I overestimated the paladins. And then another two step up to fight them, and then she goes back to fighting Vahar, and only a few seconds go by before Nazarene and Harisha kill them as well. And she's just like, okay, this is not good, this is not good. I have to stop them because they're about to go attack the rest of the soldiers and possibly even go into the city and start killing people. Vahar is adamant about, hey, you don't look away, I'm your opponent, forget about them. And she notes that she keeps like kind of diverting her attention away to try and attack the other two. Vahar, he doesn't swipe at her with his weapon, he keeps like kicking her or punching her to get her to get her attention back. He wants a real 1v1 fight. He doesn't want to sneak attack her or something. And she notes like, oh, he could have killed me probably, but he didn't. That kind of lends credence to what happens next. So she realizes she has to defeat Vahar quickly because these other two are about to, go wild. That's when she pulls out her holy attack, which is a special attack with her holy sword that she can only use once a day, and it's supposed to bypass all defenses and strike the opponent. Also, it has a scaling effect for how evil aligned the creature is. So the more evil aligned the creature is that you're using it against, the more powerful it is. And Remedios activates the attack, and she notes that normally it shines really, really brightly when she unleashes the attack. She notices it's a little dim. She's like, this is a little strange. This is weaker than I'm normally used to. So it hits Vahar, and she thinks, okay, it's done. But then Vahar's just like, what was that? Was that supposed to be like some sort of special attack? He's like a little dazed and he feels something, but he's not like hurt at all. That's when Remedios realizes, oh crap, he's not evil aligned. So in game terms, his karma values are not negative. They are like probably neutral. And Nazarene and Harisha are watching this and they're like, oh my gosh, Vahar, are you okay? Like that sword attack was it was really bright. Like I couldn't see anything. And they're both impressed with Vahar. They were like, how did you take that with no damage? That's when Remedios realized I made a mistake using this attack on Vahar. I should have saved it for the other two because the other two, I guess, had much more negative karma values than Vahar did. And I thought that was interesting because it's just like Remedios views all of these demi-humans, as evil scumbags that are coming in to attack the city. I guess in terms of world logic, Vahar is not considered a truly evil being. If I had to guess, I would say he's like Cocytus, really, because Cocytus is, I think he's in the neutral area or he's like slightly positive because Vahar kept insisting on he wanted an honorable duel. That's kind of like Cocytus's mentality as well. So I feel like it's something like that. And she also notes that because Vahar isn't evil, that most of her skills actually won't have an effect on him because most of her skills are for negatively aligned creatures. So then she just goes, okay, I just got to go attack the other two. But then Vahar uses a skill, which is kind of, I guess, pulls aggro because it forces Remedios to face him and she can't move. Like she can't attack the other people. Like it forces her to fight Vahar. And so Nazarene unleashes a spell on the crowd, but that's when Ainz shows up. Remedios immediately becomes pissed off. And the main reason she's pissed off is because in her mind, she thinks you wanted to wait for people to die so you could look cooler. And she hit the nail right on the head. That is exactly what Ainz later reveals to us that he did. He cloaked himself in an invisible spell and he waited for the right moment to come in. Pisses Remedios off to no end. She can't stand this. So she just dumps the whole thing on Ainz and turns her back and walks away. And she even thinks like, oh, if they kill me while I'm walking away, away, it'll just make the Sorcerer King look bad because he didn't protect me. That's how much she hates Ainz's guts in this moment. So Remedios leaves and we cut to Ainz's perspective, and this is where he starts thinking about Remedios. He basically puts a pause on the whole situation just to think about Remedios, and he's just like, I can't believe she just did that. Like, she didn't even thank me for coming to help her. And he actually gets so upset that his emotional suppression has to kick in. And he compares her to people he knew like back in his job on Earth. This is like a person that like came behind on a deadline and then shoved the work onto someone else because they had something else to do. And so the three demi-humans start talking shit or whatever, and Ainz is so pissed off he just immediately uses insta-death magic on them. And so actually there was a small change here in the movie. So Ainz uses the 8th tier spell Death on Harishna and Vihar, and they both immediately die. Nazarene is standing there just like, what's going on? What happened? Ainz uses it on her, but it doesn't work. And when that happens, Ainz immediately snaps out of his like kind of like stupor he was in, like just taking out his anger on these people. How did you resist that? That was an 8th tier spell. He starts thinking about like, okay, wait a minute, like, does she have some sort of race immunity? Like, what is going on? He goes through all these possibilities like really quick in his head, and he's interested by that. He's like, okay, maybe this person is actually worth something. Let's see what she does. Nazarene responds by using her trump card, which combines like an ice spell, a fire spell, and a lightning spell. They're like lances made of those elements, and she combines them all into one attack, and it's a 4th tier spell, and she launches it at Ainz. It's described really dramatically, you know. The spell powered up, it went towards Ainz, and then it just vanished when it reached Ainz. This is because it is not powerful enough to even damage Ainz, so it gets completely nullified. And then Ainz is like, oh, that was your ace? I thought you'd had something more. Okay, and then he uses Reality Slash and just kills her right there. So what actually happened was Nazarene had an armband on, which gave her complete immunity to insta-death spells. However, it can only be used once a day. So if Ainz had used another one on her right after, it would have killed her immediately. But the fact that she was able to nullify that just immediately snapped Ainz out, and he became like that super analytical, like, what's going on? What the possibilities here are endless. In the movie, he just uses insta-death magic, and it just kills all of them immediately, and then we move on. But so I thought that was a little neat thing there that they showed. So at this point in the movie, we then cut back and we finish out the scene with Nea showing her death, and then we immediately get into her revival, whereas in the book we now cut back to Nea's revival. And once again, this was shown pretty well in the movie. Not really much to comment on here in terms of missing things or changed things. This moment really is Nea's full adoption into the Ainzisms, really. This is basically where she turns into the fanatical level follower of Ainz. She gets revived and she sees Ainz, and he uses potions on her to heal her up. Small note here, he uses a purple potion. I'll go into more of that later. She thinks it's poisonous, but she doesn't fear because it's the Sorcerer King. It doesn't matter if it looks like poison. But she's laying there and Ainz is like, oh, are you all right? And she's like, you are justice. And like, it's from Nea's point of view, so we don't get Ainz's internal dialogue, but there's like a bunch of dots in the line in the book, and he's like, okay. So we know Ainz like is just like, what the hell is she talking about? And she goes on to explain, like, in her mind, the way she's rationalized it, justice without strength is meaningless, and strength without justice is meaningless. What is true justice is someone that is just but also powerful enough to enforce the justness. That's why she views Ainz as the personification of justice, which is her whole thing. That's been the culmination of her character arc here, is trying to find out and rationalize in her own mind what is true justice. So she now, in her mind, associates the concept of justice with Ainz, which basically at this point I viewed it as turning her into the fanatical level follower that we see her as for the remainder of this arc. Ainz kind of brushes this off because he doesn't really understand what the hell is going on. He's just kind of like, okay, well, I hope you're doing all right, but I have to keep moving on. A small change they made in the movie is actually during this whole thing, he's being attacked by demi-humans, but like the attacks are just bouncing off of him, and then he like turns around slowly and just like unleashes lightning and kills them, and then he casually unleashes a spell called napalm, and it just like burns a bunch of them, and he's like cleaning up the scattered demi-humans on the wall, like while this whole thing's going on, and then he leaves to go do more of that, and actually something I was kind of sad we didn't see, is that the Soul Eaters, which are those horse things, are running around the city cleaning up the demi-humans, and they have an insta-death aura. Ainz comments that in Yggdrasil, by the time you encounter Soul Eaters and stuff, most people are either resistant or immune to insta-death stuff, so that never really came into play in Yggdrasil. Whereas in the New World, it's very, very effective, and that kind of applies to Ainz too. A lot of his abilities have insta-death effects, which in Yggdrasil were pretty much worthless when he was fighting against someone that was even close to his level. A lot of people in the New World are affected by Ainz's insta-death magic, which wasn't really all that useful in Yggdrasil. So I think that's kind of a parallel there that I really enjoyed. I really wish we could have seen the Soul Eaters, mopping up. So the next scene then is also from Ainz's perspective, and he's thinking about things he needs to take care of. He's kind of just going around cleaning up, and he knows he needs to talk to Demiurge soon, and he has a scroll. He starts using some scrolls to cast some smaller spells, and he notes in his mind that the normal paper from the New World would only let them make scrolls for tier 1 spells. Because of Demiurge's ranch, and the paper he's making out of his ranch, they can now use up to tier 3 spells. And I thought this was a little interesting because in his mind, Ainz says Demiurge has contributed the most to Nazarik's abilities in the New World out of all the NPCs. At second place would be Albedo, who handles the day-to-day, but Demiurge's contributions have been the most powerful. So this isn't shown in the movie either, but Ainz contacts Demiurge and arranges a meeting, and he's worried that Demiurge is going to be mad at him because of what he did, but then they have a very cordial message, and he's like, okay, whew, Demiurge isn't mad at me. There's also a small scene where Nea shows up, and she starts talking, and she says like, oh, thank you for giving me the armor, your majesty. Like, if you hadn't given me the armor, I probably wouldn't have made it through the battle. But that's when Ainz is like in his mind, no, you definitely died. So this just goes to show us that Nea does not know that she died and got resurrected. She doesn't know that happened. She thought she just passed out or something. So she's unaware of the fact that she was resurrected. But now going back to a previous point, I said the final scene of this chapter is where Ainz thinks about the potions that he used, which I mentioned before, the purple potions, which are made by Inferia. He says that they're still slightly inferior to Yggdrasil potions, but he's been making really good progress on them. And this is a really funny scene because he then comments on something that Inferia asked Ainz about. At this point in the story, Enri and Inferia have gotten married. Ainz apparently had a conversation with Inferia where Inferia asked Ainz if he could provide him with a stamina replenishment potion, if you catch my drift here, because apparently Enri is wearing Inferia out and he needs a little bit of help. And Ainz is just like, I can't believe he asked me about that. Is it because he doesn't have a dad or something? Like, how could he think it's okay to ask me about that? And I just thought that was funny. I thought that was hilarious that Inferia was asking Ainz for a Viagra potion.
I get the sweats, my bones are cold, my teeth are loose, my heart gets really, really hot. I could read minds. And sometimes I wake up driving a stolen car. But my erections are fantastic.
It was just a little tiny paragraph of this, but I just thought it was hilarious, so I feel like I had to comment on that. But yeah, so a little extra context for what's going on with our boy Inferia over in Paradise. And so that ends the chapter, and that's where we're going to end today's video. Very long scene here in the movie. It was like a 25-minute scene, so nice solid chunk of the movie. It's about a third of this volume as well, so it's a huge battle scene. I think they adapted it pretty fairly well. There were some small things that were cut, that would have added some coolness to it, like the cleanup with the Soul Eaters and Nazarene resisting the death spell. It would have added a few things here and there, but they definitely did a much better job of adapting this part of Volume 13 than they did with a lot of other parts in Volume 12, and also how they reordered the events, which as I said, I think maybe would have been a little better if they had kept it original, but I don't really have a problem with how they did it in the movie either. Last time we left off right at the end of Chapter 4, going into Chapter 5, and that's where we're going to be picking up today. So the first scene of Chapter 5 is actually a scene between Caspon, Gustav, and Remedios and a few other paladins, higher ranking paladin people, and they're discussing the aftermath of the battle and also their future plans moving forward with how to conduct themselves. I have to be honest, guys, it's been so long since I've seen the movie now, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what they did with it, but my memory of the scene in the movie at this point was that it was very, very short. out. So basically, during the course of this conversation, Caspon keeps talking about the Sorcerer King, and just like, oh, if it wasn't for the Sorcerer King, we would have lost the battle. And he's very grateful to Ainz, but Remedios is very upset by this. Does that mean like all of our sacrifices were meaningless? He just waited for the right moment to come in and save everyone. Like, he let all these other people die when he could have just won anyway. And Caspon is like trying to calm her down and is just like, yes, you're right, the sacrifices of our troops do mean something, but the Sorcerer King was the thing that turned the tide. Like, without him, we would have lost. And Remedios is struggling to accept this fact. And an interesting thing that happens in this scene is that Remedios throws out the theory that Yaldabaoth and Ainz are working together. Maybe it was like Ainz's plan to have Yaldabaoth invade the country in order for him to save it. But this has happened a few times already in volume 12 and 13, is that Remedios has kind of correctly guessed what's actually going on here. Like what the big picture things are actually happening. Like Yaldabaoth isn't what he seems, and like Ainz isn't what he seems, and like there's other things at work here. She's already correctly guessed like a lot of Ainz's like actual intentions, but because of how he presents himself, no one believes her. No one believes that like he is actually like the mastermind behind this whole thing, even though he really isn't. It's really more Demiurge. But in the big scale of things, like, yeah, he is the cause of all of this stuff. So it's just funny that no matter what Remedios does and no matter how correct she is, like no one ever believes her. And the reason for that is she doesn't have any like conclusive evidence. It's just based on her gut feelings. She always just uses like, oh, this is just what I think. But because she has no evidence, no one believes her, even though she actually is right, which I just find funny. So the next scene of the light novel isn't something that's completely removed from the movie, but it was like jumbled up and out of order. So the next scene in the light novel is Ainz teleports back to Nazarick and has a meeting with Albedo and Demiurge. We see this very, very briefly in the movie and at a later time. In the movie, this scene is kind of presented as a flashback when Ainz is walking to go meet Yaldabaoth for their fight. A bit later on in the story when this scene actually occurs in the movie, and it's a very brief, I wouldn't even say it was a full minute, showing just a brief conversation between Albedo, Demiurge, and Ainz, and them talking about like the duel that they're going to arrange. You don't get full details from this conversation in the movie. Whereas in the book, this is like a 10-page scene here where everything is explained, like what exactly is going to be happening in the next part of the story. So that's something that the movie did very, very well, is completely changing the perspective of the events. Like, you know, in the light novel, before Yaldabaoth shows up and has this duel with Ainz, like, we already know what's going to happen. Everything is told to us as the reader. Whereas in the movie, because it's mostly from Nea's point of view, other than a few small scenes here showing us Ainz's internal dialogue, the movie leaves you much more in the dark as to what exactly is happening in these events. So the scene starts off with Ainz, Albedo, and Demiurge all meeting up, and most of the dynamics are kind of what you would come to expect from Overlord. It's from Ainz's point of view, and a big part of his internal dialogue is dedicated to just talking about how much he hates being treated like royalty and how weird it is for him still at this point. We're 13 volumes in at this point, and it's still like something he's not gotten used to. And also he's getting weirded out by like things that the NPCs are saying. Like there's this one scene where Ainz is kind of trying to determine like the bounds of their loyalty or whatever, and Demiurge Albedo says this, I can't remember who says it, and they're just like, well, Lord Ainz, your word is law. Like, if you say black is white, then it's no longer black, it's white, and that's just something we have to deal with. And Ainz is just like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Like, why are you acting this way? There's so many scenes like this throughout the story of Overlord, but they never really lose their comedic value to me. It's just how different Ainz is presenting himself to be, and how different he looks from a third person view versus when we actually hear his thoughts. The kind of juxtaposition of those two perspectives is very funny to me, especially when you're reading it in the book. So really, the rest of the conversation is just them detailing what exactly this duel and why are they setting up a fight between Ainz and Yaldabaoth. And the whole point that Ainz is trying to make by doing this whole duel is to run an exercise on if Ainz died. What would happen in the case of Ainz dying? How would you handle this? And like Albedo says like, oh, I would immediately hunt down the person that did it and prepare for your resurrection. And Demiurge is like, oh, I would prepare for some defenses, and I would try to make sure like our internals are good. They have like these different hypotheticals, but Ainz is like, listen, like you guys are coming up with different solutions. We need to have like a firm plan on if something happens to me. And another point that's brought up later on, but I'll bring it up right now, is that Ainz wants combat training. He wants to actually fight in a fight with stakes, because he hasn't had a serious fight or a fight with any sort of stakes whatsoever since his fight with Shouts here in Volume 3. And he realizes the world he's in is not a game anymore, okay? It's real life, and battle experience matters a lot. And so Ainz basically thinks about, like, if I fight against a level 100 guy, whoever has the more experience could be the determining factor, so I need to get more fighting experience under my belt. He arranges it in such a way that they are actually trying to kill him, like he wants a serious fight. None of these details are revealed in the movie. This is a huge info dump, basically spoiling the plot of what is going to be happening in the future events of the book, and that's just going to show you how different the perspectives we get in the book are versus the movie. So basically the fight drill has been set, and we then cut away to another scene with Nea, and this is basically right after her meeting with Ainz. So the timeline's a little screwy here, but in this scene we get some funny things about the rune technology. Of course, Nea reports to Ainz during the battle like, oh yes, sorry, tons of people saw my bow, but they're all dead now, so no one's alive that saw the bow. And Nea sees that Ainz is disappointed by this news, but she interprets his disappointment at sadness that citizens of this kingdom are dead, whereas in truth he's just disappointed that no one's alive that saw the bow. And this is just once again Nea kind of just misconstruing the events that are happening around her, or reshaping the events that are happening around her in a very positive light for Ainz. Also during this scene, she ends up talking to several other soldiers, and they're all talking about like, oh, Lady Baraha, like, oh, it's the assistant to the Sorcerer King. And this is showing us that Ainz is really starting to get a good following within the military of the Robo Holy Kingdom, people that support him and people that don't fear him anymore, even though he's an undead. And Remedios actually shows up, and there's even like a small confrontation between her and Nea, where like Remedios starts kind of shit talking Ainz a little bit, and Nea is now, she's no longer afraid or intimidated by Remedios. She has no problem now talking out of turn, despite the fact that Remedios still outranks her. Nea has no problems with talking back to her now. Like whenever she insults the Sorcerer King, Nea will defend him. So this is showing her change in personality. She's becoming a lot more bold. And Remedios leaves, and then Nea talks to these people, and she basically recruits them into like kind of like her own little unit. Like she's like, oh, like you guys want to work with me because like, oh yeah, like your bow skills are great. And basically I see this as like her just kind of making her own little semi-following under the umbrella of Ainz. Like she's recruiting like-minded people that think like her towards the Sorcerer King, like into her own little clique here. It's the beginnings of some big changes in the political dynamics of the Robo Holy Kingdoms, but this is like the first kind of real thing that gets the ball rolling in that direction, which I thought was interesting. So then we have a little bit of a time skip here. This does not happen in the movie, or if it does, it's not really stated what exactly happened, but there's a time skip in the book, and it's about 3 weeks. And this has happened in earlier scenes in the movie where they completely jumble up or do not really tell you about the passage of time, or there really isn't much of a passage of time. Whereas in the light novel, like from the beginning of volume 12 where we are right now in volume 13, it's been like over a month. Like this is a long time. Like in the movie, it seems like everything happened in the span of a few days. Whereas actually the timeline in the light novel, it's like a month and a half, almost 2 months, I would say, I think at this point. So during this time, Nea has been training with her kind of like new recruits or whatever, and she's noticed that her bow skills have improved significantly. And she's also noticed that she can now channel holy energy into her shots. She used to not be able to do that. She has grown significantly stronger since the big battle in the last chapter. And also Ainz's following amongst the soldiers and people has increased as well, because the paladins as well as Ainz and Nea have been liberating prison camps. Basically anyone who's been liberated by Ainz personally has like completely changed their mindset and is now like for him. This is also the point where Nea starts wearing the visor that we see in a lot of images of her. Up to this point, she actually hasn't been wearing it. Ainz gave it to her sometime during this time skip. And this visor lets her use a skill called Snake Shot. She can use it once every 3 minutes, and what this skill does is it makes her arrows, like, from the way they describe it, it makes them leap up and change direction. So like maybe like you shoot it and then it jumps up like that. I think that's like how it works. We also get some more information on some infrastructure problems that are happening within the city. The city was initially built for a population of like 20 to 30,000 people, but with all the refugees from the war, along with the people that they're liberating from the prison camps, their population of the city is like over 150,000. Like there's becoming a lot of infrastructure problems with like housing and sanitation. So they're realizing that they can't stay in this city forever, and they need to start making some plans to move out. And it's also mentioned by Nea that Ainz has actually been helping out with these problems by using summons. Like he's been summoning the Soul Eaters to like pull like cargo around, and like he's using undead to help build things. And this is another reason why the population is starting to think more highly of him and, you know, starting to come over to his side. So Ainz meets up with Nea at their like training range, and they're having like this little conversation when suddenly a big column of flame appears in the middle of the city. Ainz flies him and Nea directly to where Yaldabaoth showed up. It's also mentioned that that wall of flame that we saw in season 2 in Riestes, that has kind of sprung up around the city as well. So Ainz, Nea, and Remedios all gather in this room, and that's when Yaldabaoth rips the chunk of the wall out and is there for the confrontation. So then we have one of the most gruesome scenes in all of Overlord, where of course Yaldabaoth hits Remedios with the body of Kalka that he'd been holding on. Club scene that we saw in the very beginning of the movie. So in the month and a half since the start of this book, he has been holding on to Kalka's body this whole time and has been using it as a club. So, and it's decomposed to the point where he hits Remedios with her body, and it just splatters everywhere. We see this in the movie too. They did the scene justice in the movie, and Remedios is freaking out, understandably, because you know this is one of her really good friends and everything. And Yaldabaoth is just like, oh, like, well, I just should be praised for using something so efficiently. I used it until it broke. Even the movie, I was sitting there like, you know, I knew this was gonna happen. I had already read volumes 12 and 13 before I saw the movie. I still remember watching it in the movie, and I was just like, whoa, like this is intense. So I don't remember this happening in the movie, but what actually then happens is Remedios snaps herself out of it, and she uses her holy attack that I've mentioned in the previous video that she can only use once a day. She uses it on Yaldabaoth, but it does nothing, and she's just like, why, you're so evil, like you're obviously so karmically negative. And he's just like, you're just too weak, you can't do anything. Yaldabaoth challenges Ainz, and then he flies off, and Ainz is like, I'll go meet him, and Nea wants to go with him, but he refuses because that would kind of defeat the point. And actually at this point, it's kind of obvious to the reader that Ainz is just making up excuses for like why Nea can't come with, because he wants to be alone, because he wants to be able to like interact with the NPCs. So then we now cut to a scene with Ainz basically approaching the duel site, which we see in the movie. We see this very briefly. In the movie, this is where they then show us the meeting between Albedo, Demiurge, and Ainz. There's a full scene with Wrath and also the Pallades maids, which are also there. Something that needs to be explained is that the Pallades maids that are there are not actually the real Pallades maids. They are doppelgangers that have taken the form of the Pallades maids, and Lupus Regina and Yuri are the only ones that are there, and then also Demon Lord Wrath, who is the person pretending to be Yaldabaoth. And then the next like 2 pages are basically info dumps on everyone that's going to be in the fight. We get a lot of information on Wrath. This is where we learn that he's level 84 and he's a pure warrior type. We also get like his spells and like some of his skills, and Ainz goes on to explain like, okay, so then we have also the Lupus Regina and Yuri to help out, and he's like thinking generally these people would not really be threats. If I was just like doing this like as best as I could, or like basically fighting them as best as I could, these people wouldn't really be all that threatening to me, even as a group. So actually something Ainz does to make the fight even more difficult for himself, he doesn't want to kill the Pallades maids because of there might be like resources, like that would be resource heavy to do that. Basically weaken them to the point where I'll declare that they're out. And they basically just outline all the rules for their duel and everything. It's this huge scene that was completely removed from the anime. They didn't have any of this in the movie. And this is also a moment where Ainz once again thanks his undead nature, because he said, like, if I wasn't undead, I probably wouldn't have arranged for this because I'd be too afraid of dying. He's glad that his fear of death is stifled by his undead nature. And that's the whole point, is they have been told to come at him with intent to kill. And we do know that if Ainz loses, part of the deal was to Albedo that he has to stay within Nazarick for a year, and Albedo has to like always be in the room with him or something. It's obviously an arrangement by Albedo to try and get closer to Ainz or something like that. So in the movie, this fight is super short. We get barely anything from Ainz's perspective, and then it just cuts to Nea like viewing it, and then the scene's over. It is a super quick fight scene. It may be a minute. In the book, however, this fight between them is a lot longer. Like I think there's like at least 5 or 6 pages of just Ainz's point of view before it cuts away to Nea's. So the fight starts off and like it's just Yuri and Wrath are coming to attack him, and he's kind of like flying around and like scoping things out. He tries to cast a spell that he notices a projectile shot him and canceled his spell. That's when he realized that it's not just Yuri and Lupus Regina that are here. All the other Pallades are here. So Solution, Entoma, Shizu is here. The only one that's missing is Narbril. But all of them are here, and he's just like, you guys tricked me. Like, I thought it was just you guys. And like he actually gets like, what the hell? Like, did you guys do this as like a trick? Like, oh right, they're coming out with the kills. So of course they would like kind of trick me or something like that. Or maybe they just thought I knew they were there. It would be too long to explain every little thing that happens with this fight. Like Ainz uses this explosion spell to like push back, like it has a knockback effect, so everyone gets blown away. And because Ainz's magic defense is so high, he just uses it really close range because he's like, I'll just tank it. There's also a moment where he tries to cast a spell again and it gets canceled again by Shizu, and that's when he realizes that all of the Pallades must have been buffed by Oriel Omega. Aurelia? Or I don't even know how to say it. I say Oriel, but I'm not even sure if that's how you say it. She's on the 8th floor, and they're like, oh, there's no way she would come out here, so they must have all been buffed by her before they came here, and that's like making them even stronger than they normally would, because he was noticing like some of these skills are more powerful. And then it just cuts off and we jump over to Nea, but there's a extensive fight scene from Ainz's point of view in the book that is not in the movie at all. So then we cut to Nea's point of view, and most of it is just her like just admiring the fight and just realizing like how out of her depth like she is with beings like Yaldabaoth and Ainz. But an interesting point that she brings up in this scene is that she thinks about, I think it would be good if we became a vassal of the Sorcerer Kingdom. And she makes it her goal to like convert people. Like she actually thinks in her mind, like, I want to convert people to like think this way. And she like starts formulating a plan to like convert the kingdom citizens to like Ainz and things like that. It's actually crazy because she's like actually just verbatim saying that to herself. In the movie, we don't really get this type of stuff like from her. Like we do eventually see that she's like obsessed with Ainz and like she almost worships him and stuff. We do eventually see that stuff, but like we just don't get that inner dialogue that really like just verbatim tells us like this is what she's planning, and like this shows us like her level of dedication now. So then the fight breaks up, and we have that scene where it sees like Ainz is like launched way out. They didn't really show it all that well in the movie. In the movie, it seemed like he landed like right outside the city wall. It didn't really seem like he landed all that far away. In the book, it's described as he is launched like way across the sky, and like he is way outside. He could have landed even in the Abelion Hills. They don't even know where he lands because it's so far away. In the movie, it didn't look like he was that far, so I just thought that was funny. But then Yaldabaoth shows back up, and in the movie, he was beat up after this fight, but in the book, his injuries are described much more severely. Like, half his face is gone, like a chunk of his arm and shoulders are like ripped out, and he has like red blood that's like boiling on all over his skin. The gruesomeness of his injuries they sounded more severe than I remember them being in the movie. But I do remember in the movie that he was very beat up after this fight. So then of course we have him declaring that the Sorcerer King is dead, which was like kind of like the tagline for the promotion of the movie. But of course, like to the book reader, we know that this is a ruse. Like there's no way that Ainz is actually dead. Even though they were actually coming at him with intent to kill, there's no way that this would be allowed. But in the movie, you know, we don't have all that extra information. There's very little tidbits. Like we had this small scene with Ainz, Albedo, and Demiurge, but like really people that hadn't read the light novel wouldn't know exactly what exactly is happening, as opposed to the light novel where we know everything that's happening. So then Yaldabaoth departs, or is about to depart, and then of course we have the runes scene where he keeps trying to talk about the bow and like, oh, the bow, that thing could hurt me. He keeps trying to speak, and Nea is just screaming at him to shut up because she's so upset that Ainz is dead by his declaration. Nea's like, I can't believe a word you say, like nothing you say is true, so no one listened to him, no one listened to this demon. She keeps shouting about it, and Rav keeps trying to talk about the runes. Nea just keeps cutting him off, and so he can't say anything, which is of course just more of a running gag of the failure of trying to promote rune weapons in the Robo Holy Kingdom. So Yaldabaoth teleports away, and Nea immediately wants to just get people and go look for Ainz. Like she is like going to run out of the room and go look for Ainz immediately, and Remedios stops her, and they have a huge argument. Like Nea is like, this really goes to show you how much Nea has grown and how much she comes to have cared about Ainz. Like when it comes to Ainz, she is not backing down to anyone. She's just like, I don't care what you think, Remedios. Like, I'm going to go look for the king. Like, I'm not going to stop here. I have to go find him. But then Caspon shows up, and he kind of settles down the whole situation for a little while. So then some time passes. I'm not entirely sure how long it is, and they have a meeting discussing what they should do. In the movie, this also happens, but it's a much shorter scene, and I think there's less people there. In the book, there's also nobles there as well, and they give their take on what should be their next course of action. A lot of political things are brought up in this conversation that are left out of the movie. The nobles bring up the fact that the demi-human army has now moved to the southern part of the Robo Holy Kingdom, who's kind of a separate entity, and they're now fighting the southern army. And some nobles are pitching the idea of, oh, we should go and pincer the demi-human army. If we attack them from the north while they're fighting the south, we can wipe them out. Caspon brings up things like power dynamics within the Robo Holy Kingdom and how the North has been basically completely drained by all the attacks that have been happening lately, and that even if they do wipe out the demi-human army, as of right now, the Southern army is much stronger, so they would be able to enforce their will on the North, and like the North would be at a massive disadvantage compared to the South because they're drained and the South isn't. And so basically what Caspon proposes is that they should retake Kalishna, which we saw in volume 12. That was when the first big battle between Remedios and the Holy Queen was there too, because it's a fortress city. Also, it's larger, and he wants to recapture their cities because they need more bases of power, and that they should let the Southern army fight the demi-humans for a time because they need to preserve the balance of power. Once again, we're just getting a lot bigger political scope of what's happening in the Robo Holy Kingdom. But then Nea interjects and says she wants to look for Ainz, and she also wants to send a messenger to the Sorcerer Kingdom to tell them what happened to Ainz, and she wants to be the one to do it, but this idea is thrown out by Caspon because he's just like, oh, Nea, you're not a high enough rank, like that would be improper for you to go. But she's like determined to at least go look for Ainz. But her plan is put on hold because Caspon is called out. He just says like, something has come up, I have to go, and that's where the chapter ends. That's left ambiguous for the time being. So in the movie, it immediately skips to Nea going to meet Shizu after this. In the book, we get the intermission chapter, and the intermission chapter has nothing to do with any of this stuff that is going on. They're completely unrelated events. So I understand why they removed it from the movie. They basically always remove intermission chapters from the Overlord anime. I think there was like one or two that they included in there. So the intermission chapters, there's two scenes in the intermission chapters. So it cuts to the Baharuth Empire where Jerknev is managing some things. He's like doing some administrative tasks. Basically, it's showing you that Jerknev actually kind of likes being a vassal state. All the people that would have complained to him before, he can now direct them to, oh, just complain to Ainz then if you want to complain. No one wants to complain to Ainz because they're also afraid of him. His stomach ulcers have ceased as well, and he's stopped losing his hair. He says he has like half the work he used to have back when he was an autonomous ruler. And another really kind of cute point is Ryuro shows up. As it turns out, they actually both met each other at some time previously in the Sorcerer Kingdom. They were both waiting to meet Ainz, and they just kind of struck up a conversation, and they are now really great friends. When they meet each other, they like are hugging each other. He's just like, oh, I'm so good to see you, Ryuro. It's kind of a sweet scene because Jerknev is like, oh, this is my first real friend. Like he's never had friends before because of his royal upbringing. Ryuro is a person that's gone through the same thing he has. They are both rulers that have been subjugated by Ainz, and so basically they've been brought together in Jerknev's eyes by their collective suffering under Ainz. I'm not entirely sure how long it's supposed to have been when this scene happens, but like they already get news of Ainz dying in the Robo Holy Kingdom, so I'm assuming it had to have been at least like a week or two. So once again, the passage of time, like how they show it in the movie versus like what it is in the book, completely distorted. So the second scene that happens in the intermission is a very brief scene between an Eight Fingers executive and Hilma is losing her shit over Philip, how irritating he is to deal with, and like how it's like he's just so freaking stupid. I don't think we can work with him. Like I know Albedo told me to get an idiot, but we might have done it too much because like he's so stupid it might actually screw up the plan. And that's what they call foreshadowing, people, because that's exactly what happens in season 4. The point of view character is not named, but it's just some guy that works with Hilma, and like Hilma is like rolling around on the floor and is like yanking her hair because she's just so annoyed. But and that's basically all the scene is. It's just Hilma complaining about Philip. But I just thought these scenes were funny because they show you a little bit more. Number one, what's going on with like so many events took place in the Baharuth Empire in the previous volumes that it is showing you kind of the fallout, or not really the fallout, but the resolution of what's happened since the Baharuth Empire has submitted to the Sorcerer Kingdom, as well as foreshadowing the events of the next volume. So last time we left off was the end of chapter 5, and there was a meeting that took place between Caspond, the Paladin Order, Nea was there, and there was also several nobles from the Robo Holy Kingdom. So I already talked about that scene in my last video, but in the movie, that scene does not take place, and they kind of merge like some of what happens in that meeting with a meeting that takes place later on that they show in the movie that's also in the book. They've done this before in the movie. A prime example is, I think it was part 2 of my cut content. In volume 12, the light novel, there was one battle scene where Ainz does all that stuff at the gate that we see in the movie, and then there's another separate battle scene that takes place days later where he actually fights Buser. Whereas in the movie, they made all of that happen at the same time in the same place. That's kind of what happens here with these meetings. There's 2 separate meetings, but in the movie they made them one meeting. So the first scene shown in the movie during this portion of the light novel is it's been 3 days since Ainz has been defeated and Nea is training. So there's actually a small scene that takes place before this 3-day time skip that was cut from the movie, and it's between Nea and several other people, and it's basically showing you Nea's like kind of growing group, and how I mentioned in the last cut content that she's kind of collecting people that are like-minded and think like her, and it's basically just showing us that she is getting more and more people. There are more people coming over to her side, and she basically gets a group together of volunteers to go look for Ainz in the territory of the Sacred Kingdom. And this is actually a deviation from the movie, because in the light novel, she does get permission to send a search party out. Now granted, she doesn't go with them because she has no ranger skills, but Caspond actually does give permission for a search party to be dispatched so long as they look only in the Sacred Kingdom territory. And they did a good job of showing this in the movie, but it's really emphasized heavily in the light novel, is basically Nea is kind of losing her shit over not getting any news about Ainz, and she's not sleeping very much. You can see it in the movie too, but she's getting bags under her eyes. I don't think they really showed it all that well in the movie, but in the light novel, every time she like looks at people or takes off her visor, people are like, whoa, like because her face is like so scary because she already has like a super fierce face. This happens several times in the light novel. Basically every time someone sees Nea without her visor on, they're like, whoa, what's going on with you? I think you need to chill out. So in the light novel, in the movie, she gets called to meet with with Caspon, and this is where I'm talking about that they kind of merged this conversation with the previous scene that had already taken place in the light novel. Because in the movie, Nea asks about, oh, are we sending a search party out to go look for the Sorcerer King? But in the light novel, that conversation and all that had already taken place, so that wasn't a part of this conversation in the light novel. So in the light novel, they immediately bring in the Zarin representative, and this is all pretty much the same, but there's a couple of observations made by Nea that are kind of excluded from this conversation in the movie. So in the movie, this is all real quick. Like, they just kind of break down the plot points exactly of just, okay, the Zarin want to rebel, we're gonna save their prince, we'll get the Zarin on our side. In the light novel, they spend more time, number one, from Nea's point of view, talking about how skeptical she is of the Zarin. She is very, very dubious about the Zarin and this whole plan of theirs. And second of all, they talk a little bit more about kind of political things going on here, because Caspon talks about how the Zarins have kind of like put them in a position of power over them because they now know that the Zarins want to betray Yaldabaoth, and so Caspon's like saying like, oh, we can just use that against them, and we can get like the demi-human army to wipe out the Zarin if we have to. Nea makes a note of how ruthless Caspon is. That doesn't have anything to do with what's going on right now, but that does come into play later. When we get to that, I'll talk about it, but I just wanted to make a note of that right there. The light novel also gives a really detailed breakdown of how fortified Kalinsha is, which is the city that they're going to infiltrate to save the prince. It was designed as a fortress city, and it's a bottleneck point in the Robo Holy Kingdom. Basically the most fortified city, even more so than their capital Hoburns, in the entire Robo Holy Kingdom. And like how there's a sky bridge, like we see that later on in the movie, like it's really hard to do anything with that without being spotted. And they give you more scale as to how difficult this mission actually is. And because of the difficulty of the mission, at first in the light novel, Nea says no. They're like, hey Nea, we're gonna put you on this mission. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way I can do this, because she's just like, I have no stealth skills, like I'm not a stealthy fighter, like this is not for me. But she decides to do it purely because she thinks in her mind, this is a chance for me to be useful to the Sorcerer King, so I'm gonna take this chance and I'm gonna do it. Because she's already kind of developed this pseudo ideology of hers of like, oh, weakness is a sin. We see this in the movie. She says that a few times in the movie. She doesn't really hesitate all that much in the movie. You don't really get to see that, whereas in the light novel it's very clear, like Nea is not confident that she's gonna be able to pull this off at all. So then in the movie, after this, Caspon sends Nea to go see Shizu. That's not what happens in the light novel. Shizu is actually introduced in this scene. So in the light novel, they bring her in and she's in chains, which doesn't really mean much because she actually shows them that like she's like, okay, and she's about to break the chains, but Remedios stops her. And this is where she's just like, oh yes, I'm under Lord Ainz's control and he told me to work with you guys, so I'll help you with this. And Nea is super sus about this whole thing. She is also super dubious of CZ. We don't really see that all that much in the movie either, but that persists like pretty much up until the end of the mission that they're on, is that Nea is just constantly doubting that CZ is actually under the control of Ainz, and like she could just be pretending and secretly working for Yaldabaoth. That thought process persists so much for the remainder of this chapter. There's just always these offhanded like remarks of, oh, she could be working for Yaldabaoth, oh, this could be a lie. We don't really see any of that doubt in the movie. In the movie, she is just full hog, you know, all in. She also notes that Caspon's reasoning for like sending her on this mission with ZZ, because she questions it. She's like, yo, we just met this girl. Like, we don't know anything about her. She could be, you know, lie. We don't know what she can do. Like, this could all be lies. Nea notes that Caspon's reasoning is super vague and like it's not like very reasonable and stuff like that. In the light novel, we get this internal dialogue from Nea where she realizes she's being used as basically a sacrificial pawn. Basically, she sees that this whole situation has been engineered to where if Nea succeeds as a part of this mission, then it's like, oh, a representative of the Sacred Kingdom was there to help. But if the mission fails and, you know, Nea's killed, then it's just a troublesome squire that, you know, had like, that was attached to the Sorcerer King was removed. And so the way Nea sees it is she's been set up to fail. So then Shizu's let out and Nea says, oh, I need to talk to her more in order to understand. If I'm going to work with her, I need to get to know her better. I did want to point out they don't really make a comment on this in the movie, but the reason why they put Shizu in that abandoned mansion was because it's basically a pseudo isolation cell, and that's why it's all boarded up and there's no lights on in there, is because it's supposed to be an isolation cell, or makeshift one basically, and that's why they're keeping her in there. So in the movie, this is the first time Nea is meeting Shizu, whereas it isn't in the light novel. The conversation is pretty much the same. There's not really much to say in terms of cut content in this single conversation here. I did want to make a few observations about some of the comments that are thrown out in this conversation though. So one of the first things that happens is Shizu pulls out these, like, I think they're chocolate shakes. I think that's what they are. And she gives one to Nea, and she comments that they're very high in calories and they have 2,000 calories in them. And then she says, like, oh, one of the supreme beings said that getting fat off of sweets should be a life goal. And I think the supreme being she was quoting was Ankaro Mochi Mochi, who designed Pistonia and Eclair, and they're like, her whole thing was like, she just loved sweets, and that's why all of her NPCs have like the sweets names. Like Pistonia's name has her full name's Pistonia Shortcake Wako, and then Eclair, of course, is the dessert as well. And then Nea just drinks it, and she's like, oh my god, this is so delicious, can I have another one? And in her mind, she's just like, oh, I'll just cancel this out by having a lighter dinner, because she doesn't know what calories are. This is a medieval world, so they don't know what that is. So she doesn't know that, you know, this little thing has your entire daily caloric intake in it. So that's why she has 2 days worth of calories in one go. I guess for a medieval, probably malnourished soldier, you know, that's probably fine to do once. There was this small thing that was cut from the movie where Shizu comments on Nea's bow, and she goes like, oh, you should show off your bow more, or like, oh, your bow is very impressive, you need to show it to more people. And Nea can tell that Shizu is very clearly like just following a script. Like, she's just like, it sounded like someone else said those words for her and she's just copying them. So there's even more rune running gag stuff in the light novel than there was in the movie, which was already one of the funniest points of the movie, if you ask me. There's also something then they start talking about Ainz that the movie doesn't really mention. It's that Nea notices that some of the things that Shizu is saying kind of contradicts like what she think could happen. Shizu makes a comment about like how, oh, those who come after should listen to the ones that came before, and Nea's just like, what are you talking about? I've been serving the Sorcerer King longer than you have, because to Nea's knowledge, CZ had just been taken control of in the previous fight, in the previous chapter. And they also make a point of this in the movie of where Shizu says like, oh yes, he said I could call him Lord Ainz, and Nea's just like, what are you talking about? When did he give you permission to do that? During the fight? Shizu kind of brushes over this, but like Nea is basically noticing those kind of logical contradictions going on in this conversation. But they basically bond over their shared love of Ainz, and this is where Shizu puts the sticker on her, and we don't really see what's on it in the movie, but in the book Nea notes it's the number 1 followed by what she thinks is some letter. It's actually a 1 yen sticker. And Shizu just kind of puts that on things that she's like, oh, puts it on things she thinks are cute. One small thing in the movie, Shizu says, I put this on cute things. But in the book, Shizu's like, you're not cute, but I'm gonna put this on you anyway because I like you. And this comes up a few more times in the book, and it's actually kind of funny. The scene plays out pretty much exactly the same from this point on. There's really no more cut content, and then we move straight into the infiltration of Kalinsha. So these events play out pretty faithfully in the movie. We just get more explanation as to why they're doing what they're doing. Like whereas in the movie, this stuff just happens, and you know, you don't really know what's going on. They're just infiltrating the castle. As for why they snuck in the barrels with meat, it was intentionally to mask their sense, because some demi-humans in the army have very, very good senses of smell. Also, there's a little internal dialogue from Nea when Shizu pulls out the weapons, and we see the gun that Shizu has. And we get some information on how Nea views that gun, and how it's a mana gun, so it uses magic to shoot its bullets. Shizu mentions like, oh, don't worry, this gun doesn't use gunpowder. And Nea's like, what the hell is gunpowder? Like, I don't know what that is. Because obviously this world doesn't have gunpowder. Firearms aren't a normal thing. There are like items that use like gun-like things, like we saw that with, we see that in season 4. Gunpowder doesn't exist in this world. So like when she mentions like and starts talking about guns and stuff like that, Nea has no idea what she's talking about, so she just kind of brushes over it. And also that Nea is calling Shizu Miss Shizu at Shizu's request as kind of like a seniority thing. And Shizu is getting like, when she doesn't call her Miss Shizu, she gets like noticeably grumpy if she doesn't get called that, which is adorable. So then we get the full infiltration. And once again, this was pretty faithful in the movie, but I'll just explain what's going on. There's a scene where they rappel down the outside of the wall. They kind of go to a lower floor. The reason they do that is because the demi-humans, they knew there was a long corridor on that floor. So they needed to get down to the floor below so they could have a clear line of sight when they attack the demi-humans, and so they could take them out quickly. It's small things like that. It's basically telling us there are strategic reasons for every action that they're taking. They're not just freeballing it. This was a well thought out plan here. There was a small thing when they get to that sky bridge, and Nea is kind of like analyzing it in the light novel, and she's like, oh man, like this is gonna be dangerous. I am super scared to do this. And I think Shizu noticed how worried Nea was about the sky bridge, because she's already claimed Nea, and so she doesn't want anything to happen to Nea. So she's just like, you know what? I'm gonna take care of this. You wait here, Nea. That's what I think happened. This isn't from Shizu's point of view. We don't get her point of view at all in the book. So that's what I just would think was happened, because she was like looking at her really hard when Nea was analyzing the sky bridge and kind of freaking out. So then they're climbing the spire to get to the prince's room. And that's when they encounter the Va'um guard. Now, I mentioned all the demi-human types in one of these cut content videos, but I'll go ahead and explain what the Va'um is. Va'um are basically a sub-race of ogres, and they have powers that control water. We see that a little bit during the fight, because like he creates mist, and he like kind of, his body like kind of reforms, like it turns into liquid. That's the water powers of the Va'um being shown. And the fight is basically exactly the same as it is in the light novel. I really don't have much to say here. I thought it was beautifully done in the anime. Very good job. There was one small thing, is after the Va'um is defeated, in the movie, Nea says, like, I have this item that'll let me use a recovery spell, but I can only use it once. In the book, Nea makes a note of she used to only be able to use it once, but now she can use it multiple times because she's gotten stronger because of the fight that she was a part of previously. So I guess in the light novel, she's stronger than she is in the movie. So then we meet the Zarin prince, and this scene once again is pretty much the same. Not much to comment on here in terms of cut content. There's small funny comments made by Nea throughout this scene, like when she picks the prince up and puts him on her back in like a sack. She said there was a comment about her saying she's done this with babies before, but every time she looks at a baby they always cry, which of course is referencing her intense eyes. And also how like she thinks the Zarin prince is like funny looking, and how he just looks like a maggot. What is going on? Like, he looks so different compared to the Zarins that we saw before. So then after that, we get a scene where the Prince, Nea, and Shizu meet up with other Zarins, and they discuss their next move. So this is where we finally have some significant cuts here. This scene is shortened immensely. So in the movie, basically, they just decide, like, okay, we're gonna go take out this demon aid, and then we're gonna get out of here. In the light novel, they actually have a conversation about how they're, like, what can we do? We can't go back to the Abelion Hills because like Yaldabaoth's demon has taken over our territory. And that's where Nea suggests that they all go to the Sorcerer Kingdom as refugees. And the princess is like, oh, it's ruled by an undead though. And Nea's like, no, trust me. Subhumans and humans all live there in peace. Like it'll be fine. Where the prince decides that all the Zarins after Kalinshina is liberated will get out and go to the Sorcerer Kingdom to escape Yaldabaoth. But then one of the Zarins brings up like, oh, one of the demon aids of Yaldabaoth is here. And in the movie, they basically just decide to fight the demon aid because it's just like, it's a good chance to take it out and weaken Yaldabaoth's army or whatever. Like they don't really give an explanation as to why they want to fight it. Whereas in the light novel, because they're going to the Sorcerer Kingdom, they want to disrupt disrupt Yaldabaoth's command structure and see, like, slow the news that the Zarans are fleeing to the Sorcerer Kingdom. So they want to take out the Demon Aid in order to mess up Yaldabaoth's command structure for that area. Really good reasoning here, and that we get in the light novel. I'm amazed at how well thought out. It just seems like everything has a reason for why it happens. You know, it's not just because it looks cool or for plot convenience. There are specific reasons for everything going on. So the demon they fight is called a circlet, but there are other demons that are like kind of like the circlet, but they're higher ranked. And the highest ranked is called a silk hat. And silk hats can equip up to 4 heads and can use up to 10th tier magic. And Shizu mentions that, and she's like, if we run to a silk hat who can use 10th tier, we have to run. And then as soon as she says 10th tier, Nea and the prince are like, what are you talking about 10th tier? Because the prince was like gloating earlier in this conversation that he can use 4th tier magic. And they're like, isn't 5th tier the highest that a normal person can do? That's the upper limit. And Shizu's like, no, the spell that Yaldabaoth used to drop a meteor on the gate, that was a 10th tier spell. And that's when Nea's like, oh wait, can the king use 10th tier spells too? And Nea's like, yeah, duh. And everyone just starts freaking out. They're just like, what the fuck is 10th tier? Like 10th tier? Like we're going to this guy's country, this guy who can use 10th tier stuff? What the? They didn't even know 10th tier existed. We also get a little bit more of an explanation as to the other head besides Kellart that the circlet is using. In the movie they mention this as well, but it's called the grandmother. Not like, oh, this is my grandma. It's the grandmother of the Pandex race, which is a different race of demi-humans. And we also get an explanation as to that magic that we see the circlet use during the fight. So basically the grandmother and the prince have basically the same type of magic, but they're inverses of each other. That's why every time during the fight, the prince uses a spell. He says yin blank spell. The circlet says yang that same spell, because they cancel each other out. And the prince knows this before going into the fight. He mentions that, like, oh, if the circlet has the grandmother's head, then he'll be able to cancel out all my magic. But the circlet can only use cumulative tiers up to 6. And because the prince is casting 4th tier magic, that means the circlet will only be able to use 2nd tier magic on them. So basically we just get more of an explanation before the fight even takes place as to the abilities of the circlet and what exactly the circlet can do. So then we have the actual fight with the circlet, which once again, I think the movie did a wonderful job here. There's basically nothing missing from this fight scene. There was one small thing where before the fight, Nea asked who the other head that the circlet was, and the Zarin prince goes, oh, I don't know, it's a human. And Nea thinks like, oh my gosh, it could be the Holy Lady. And so she asks the prince, what color was the hair? And the prince goes, oh, it was black or light black, I think. And Nea's like, okay, no one from the Sacred Kingdom has black hair. Like you only see black hair if you go south. So it can't be someone from the Sacred Kingdom. But then when the fight starts, we get this big scene in the movie too, where it's revealed that the second head that the circlet has is of Kellart, and she does not have black hair. So Nea immediately goes to the prince. It's just like, you told me that person had black hair. That is Kellart Custodio. That person does not have black hair. And the prince is like, what are you talking about? That person obviously has black hair. And it's because the Zarans are actually colorblind. They, as Nea describes it as, they are only able to see in black and white, which I guess they don't have the term colorblind in the New World. But yeah, the Zarans are actually colorblind. So that was just a mistake on the prince's part due to his colorblindness. Then we have that scene where Shizu jumps in front of Nea, and I was always under the impression that the demon was gonna kill everyone. Definitely gonna kill Nea until Shizu jumped in, and that basically made the demon change their plan. Like, okay, so, because the demon obviously knows who Shizu is, and so the demon was just like, oh shit, one of the Pleiades likes this human, I better not kill this human. And then of course we have the runes promotion, which I gotta admit, during the movie it just felt it was so disjointed in the movie, and I think that really worked. She's just suddenly yelling about the runes, and the demon is just like, oh, the ancient magic of runecraft. And even the prince is like, oh, runes are on that weapon? And Nea's just like, no, shut up. And this line was so funny in the dub because there's just a long silence, and then the demon goes, but the runes! I just thought that was so funny. So then the fight ends, And this is where we get a massive deviation from the light novel. So in the movie, we hear the Liberation Army and we cut to Remedios and she's riding in, and then Yaldabaoth descends. The Zarans are they vanish into thin air after that. They are never seen on screen again after that because it's just CZ and Nea running to do they immediately jump into this final battle scene here. That is not what happens in the light novel. In the light novel, after the little talk, after defeating the demon, they can hear the Liberation Army kind of coming in, and then they can hear the battle for Kalinsha is starting, and Prince directs the Zarin like, okay, you gotta help the humans take back the city like we agreed, and then they're supposed to get back in the barrels and get out of the city, but Nea and Shizu don't want to get back in the barrels, so they're both like, okay, we'll help you with the fighting, and the prince is like, okay, let's go. We have to get back in the barrels, and we'll go meet some of my other tribe mates. And that's the end of the scene, and several weeks go by in the next page. Yeah, in the movie, they just immediately move into this big final battle scene right there in Kalinsha. The chapter ends with them saying, all right, let's get into the barrels and go meet up with my other tribe mates. You turn the page, there's no battle scene in Kalinsha at all. Several weeks had passed. They merged the ending chapter of the book right in the same scene. Like I said, they've done this before where they're taking scenes that happen in different places in different times in the light novel and just kind of combining them into one giant scene. So basically imagine in the movie when that cut happens to go over to Remedios and the army coming in and everything like that. Imagine that happening, but several weeks later and in a different place. That's kind of what happens in the light novel. But we will get into that next time because that is the end of chapter 6. Guys, I know this is such a long book. I swear. I covered over 100 pages in this video. It's once again a huge chunk of the book, but this book is just like so huge. But next time, guys, we will be covering the final chapter, chapter 7, and the epilogue of volume 13 of Overlord, and also be finishing up covering the Sacred Kingdom content. There were a lot less glaring omissions than there were last time. Unlike the previous part, the battle scenes were very, very faithful to the light novel, and actually they felt like they were a little longer in the movie than they were in the light novel. I don't know, I felt like I read them pretty fast. Basically what changed in the light novel to movie was the tone in the light novel. Just Nea is more on edge with who she's working with in the light novel. You just notice that way more than you do in the movie. In the movie, she just kind of seems to go along with everything very, very quickly. There's way more doubt in Nea's mind that's prevalent in the light novel than we get in the movie. So this time around, guys, going into the final events of this arc, we do have really quite a few omissions as well as reordering of events. I mentioned last time that in the movie, they go directly from saving the Zarin Prince to this final confrontation with Yaldabaoth right there in the same city. But in the light novel, there is a time skip between the rescue of the Zarin Prince and the final battle. Chapter 7 opens up sometime later after the rescue of the Zarin Prince, and Nea is giving a speech to people in Kalinsha. In the movie, they pushed this back to take place after everything had already resolved, whereas in the light novel, she has been giving speeches and speaking about Ainz and gathering her following pretty much ever since the mission with the Zarin Prince ended. I think it's also mentioned that it's been a month since the liberation of Kalinsha. So once again, a significant time skip has occurred here. And during that time, she has basically been giving speeches talking about the Sorcerer King and also recruiting people because she's trying to put together a very large search party to go into the Abelion Hills to look for Ainz, and they need a lot of people for that, like because it's going into hostile territory. And we also meet one of her followers. His name is Beltran. We see him in the movie at the very end as well, but it's at this point where we start to learn that Nea has gathered a very significant following, and like her group is huge. I think in the book they said they have 30,000 members, so that's almost as many subscribers as we have because we've been gaining subscribers. Awesome. And don't forget to subscribe if you aren't subscribed. I'm sorry, I couldn't help putting in a plug there.
Oh, brother.
In the time between this moment and when the liberation of Kalinsha happened, they've been liberating more camps and everything, and basically everyone that's liberated by Nea and Shizu is basically brought brought into the fold, and because Nea is basically able to talk to them about the Sorcerer King and convince them that, like, oh, the Sorcerer King, we need him and we need to go rescue him, and he's all, you know, great and everything, and she basically converts them into her mindset. And because of their involvement, her and CZ have both become very popular. In the movie, you know, Ainz had already appeared again and had saved the day, and, you know, everything's been resolved when this speech happens in the movie. But in the light novel, she's basically trying to get these people on her side so they'll join her in her quest to go look for Ainz. So the context of the speech happening is totally different. I should also mention that within Nea's group, there's a militant group called the Supporters Guard, and she's like the head of that group. So they're almost kind of their own little independent thing within the Liberation Army. So Nea's influence has just steamrolled ever since the events of the previous chapter. Something that happens in the light novel is there's another scene where Nea has her speech and then she retires to her room and she has a talk with her assistant. Yeah, she has her own personal assistant. That's how much, you know, how important Nea has become. Is she has like just so many people working for her now. And during this scene, there's some interaction between Nea and Shizu because Shizu's like hanging out in the room, and apparently it's like their room. They share a room together. And this scene basically just elaborates on the fact that her and Shizu have gotten very, very close. They're like hugging a lot, and they like do stuff together. They like go shopping together and go like to restaurants and stuff together. It's really cute. Honestly, it's just adorable. So then after that scene in the room, we then cut to another scene that was omitted from the movie with Caspon. So in this scene, he talks about how Remedios reacted when Nea and CZ brought back Kellart's head from the previous chapter, and she was not okay, obviously. I mean, that's her younger sister, so she was very clearly devastated by that. And so Caspon is basically focusing on trying to keep Remedios as busy as possible in order to avoid her like breaking down. And a paladin asks him if they should stop Nea, because Nea keeps like talking about the Sorcerer King and kind of undermining the authority of the Sacred Kingdom and like basically the royal, you know, all the affiliate royal organizations and things like that. And Caspon basically responds to this by saying like she's too popular to stop at this point. Like we can't like kill her or anything because like that would not go unnoticed. People would notice her absence and ask questions, and like we can't just shut her down because there'd be like revolts over that stuff. And also he mentions that she has Shizu on her side, and there's not really pretty much anything they can do to stop Shizu. So because of that, Nea, they're kind of just letting Nea do whatever she wants because of all those factors. So then someone comes in and tells Caspon that an army from the south has appeared. Yeah, this just keeps going on. Pretty much the first half of chapter 7 was just completely lifted out of the movie, and they scattered it around. But yeah, so the next scene is between Caspon and the southern nobles that have brought up an army from the south. And this scene is basically just introducing a few southern noble characters. None of them are really important, but it's showing some political maneuvering going on in the Robo Holy Kingdom. Like the southern nobles are basically like trying to kind of ingratiate themselves to Caspon because it's, you know, pretty obvious that Caspon's going to become the next ruler since I think he's the next in line. So in this scene, the Liberation Army and the Southern Nobles Army combine in order to try and recapture the city called Prado. And their goal is to try and wipe out the demi-humans remaining in the north. In the next scene, another week passes. Like I've mentioned this before, that the passage of time in the movie, it really doesn't seem like that much time has passed. It feels like this all happens in the span of a couple days or something. It is literally months. At the end of the volume, they mention that 6 months have passed since the war began. So then the next scene is from Nea's point of view, and she describes the situation that they're in as they're marching on Prado to try and liberate it. And Nea leads a group of 2,000 archers, but because she's like a support unit, she's not in the main battle. She's kind of like held in reserve. So something that's different that happens in the movie versus in the light novel is that this final battle in the movie takes place within the city. In the book, this final battle is actually taking place in a field. In this case, the Sacred Kingdom actually outnumbers the demi-human. Nea is still a little concerned about that though, because, you know, demi-humans individually are usually physically more powerful than regular humans. So the numbers thing is definitely an advantage that they need. And so as I mentioned before, Nea and CZ are being held in reserve, and it's mentioned like by Nea, like, why are we not allowed? She starts thinking like, why were we not allowed to join, me and CZ? And it's implied that they held them back because they don't want them becoming any more famous than they already are. So even though deploying CZ, because CZ is very powerful, would save lives and like cut down on the casualties, they're willing to accept that because like their influence is becoming too great and it's becoming a threat in the eyes of the Paladin Order, and so they're trying to keep them, you know, out of the major battles. So that gives you some more perspective as to the political situation going on, which we really don't get all that much in the movie. You know, they don't really have the time to talk about like all the political stuff, like with the nobles and like the South and stuff. It's mentioned a few times in the movie that like, oh yes, there's a political divide with the South, but like they don't really show it as much as they do explicitly in the light novel. So during this battle in the field, Yaldabaoth then shows up with the big column of flame that we see in the movie. That happens in this battle in the field. So Yaldabaoth shows up, and then for the next like 4 or 5 pages, I can't remember exactly, it's several pages, it is basically just going through multiple different people's perspectives that were in the army, and it's describing their interactions with Wrath. Wrath has this skill called Aura of Flame, and it deals fire damage to anyone around him. Normally, you know, if he's fighting a level equivalent person, it wouldn't really do anything, but because the humans are so much weaker than him, it's actually lethal. He's giving off so much fire, and flames are like coming off his body, and just being around him is enough to kill these people when he has that skill active. And the perspectives are basically just these people burning alive, and it just keeps going through perspectives. It's super graphic and gruesome, and it describes like there's this one perspective where it's like these people are running away. It's from the perspective of this young woman, and like she said she could feel the fire on her hair, like on the ends of her hair, and it like coming up her hair and like reaching her scalp. Very descriptive and graphic, and I probably can't go into detail on it, otherwise YouTube will get mad and start wiggling their finger at me. I know they show that flames are coming off of Wrath in the movie, but they definitely don't show that it can kill you just from being around Wrath in the movie. So that was, you know, something that was very, very graphic, and you know, it's very explicit. And actually, I wanted to comment on this. There's this small little paragraph, not even a paragraph, maybe a few sentences from Wrath's point of view. I think this really goes to show you like just the type of story that Overlord is, and like who is actually our main character and main group here. He says he's bored, like while he's doing this, like in his thoughts. It's like describing like he's stepping over corpses. There's piles of people, you know, scattered around him because of his flame aura. He said he's just bored. You know, he's just like, don't you guys know I could have done a lot more damage if I was like flying around or something? Like, why are you guys freaking out so much? It's just how casual and how little, you know, value that these Nazarick people put on human lives. I've mentioned this before in other videos, like throughout the years of covering Overlord. You forget sometimes how cruel the people of Nazarick can be. Sometimes it feels like it's justified. You know, like sometimes it feels like, oh, these people that, you know, Ainz is retaliating against, they're just getting what they had coming to them. But then other times, it doesn't feel as justified. And what I think Maruyama does a great job at, he takes the time to show the perspectives of just people that are normal ass people. It's the individual that he focuses on sometimes to show how these actions affect the individuals of the New World. And I think that's a layer of detail in Overlord that I really love, and we don't see too much in anime in general, but specifically isekai anime. We really don't see that type of effect ripple down like this, and that's one of the reasons I love Overlord so much. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but moving on to the content here. And so after this scene, there's a small time skip where the army has regrouped after this battle, and they're just trying to recover and think about what they can do to deal with Yaldabaoth. Remedios comes in and says, like, you know, I'm resolved to die against Yaldabaoth. I can't hope to defeat him, but if even, like, you know, something, even if I sacrifice myself and I buy you guys time to retreat, I'll do it. And there's even a scene where the nobles try to convince Shizu to fight Yaldabaoth. It's not from her point of view, so we don't know exactly what's going on in her mind, but my interpretation of that was she didn't really know what the right answer was to say here in this case. And then one of the nobles says, whoa, what, are you afraid of fighting Yaldabaoth? And Cizi's just like, oh, yes, yeah, what you said, that I am scared, yeah. So she basically just took the out that was presented by the noble to not fight. So then the demi-humans attack again. We're notified that they are on the move. So there's another battle. So this, you know, like I said, this final battle is actually 2 different battles in the light novel. And during this battle, it's from Nea's point of view, and she's not actually like in the melee that's going on between the demi-human army and the Liberation Army. And she's hearing reports that Yaldabaoth is teleporting around and causing massive casualties. You know, because he just shows up one area, burns everybody, and then Remedios is like trying to chase him down, but every time like she's about to get to him, he just teleports away to a different area and causes massive casualties somewhere else. And then we have Ainz's arrival, where he arrives with the reinforcements from the Abelion Hills. We learn that he has not only brought reinforcements from the Abelion Hills, but he's also conquered the Abelion Hills. He's integrated that area into the Sorcerer Kingdom. What happens with his arrival and the interactions are relatively the same. There's not really much to say between the movie and the light novel here, but really it's the scale, because like I said, Nea has already had time to establish her follower group at this point, and there's a lot of them there. So there's more people like cheering on the Sorcerer King, and like also a lot of them are like bowing to him and like praising him as some sort of deity and stuff. And Ainz seems a little overwhelmed with this. Like he's just like, okay, weirded out by their actions like in the light novel. So then Ainz takes off and battles Yaldabaoth. The confrontation, as short as it was in the movie, it was maybe 30 seconds of explosions and stuff. We don't really see like detailed things of what's going on in the fight. It was still longer than it was in the light novel. In the light novel, it's literally just like a couple of lines of stuff. Hold on, I'm actually gonna read it. It's really not that long. Light, darkness, fire, lightning, shooting stars, incomprehensible phenomena all crashed together. And then Nea cheered because of her sharp eyes. She saw the flames scatter in the darkness descending. Compared to the last fight, this one was over so quickly. It seemed a testament to the fact that if the king had possessed all his mana, if there hadn't been demon maids in the way, of victory would have been this simple the first time. And that makes sense to say in the light novel, because in the light novel, the first fight was substantially longer than this fight. You know, it was like 20 or so pages, but in the movie, they were around the same length because they cut down on that first fight so much. So then in the light novel, the next scene is our epilogue. So the epilogue in the light novel also details the cleanup, the things that have been happening in the, you know, Holy Kingdom, like infrastructure, and how much of an infrastructure problem this war has caused. You know, there's a shortage on food. They're gonna have to rebuild. There's a shortage on labor because so many people have died. Also, they mentioned that a lot of the wealth and magic items are missing from a lot of residences and the treasuries and stuff. And it's specifically mentioned by Nea in this scene that it was weird that they didn't find any of these missing magic items or missing wealth in the transport trains of the demi-humans. Like why was there no transport? Like we should have found some of them, and that implies that they were taken by Nazarick. You know, all the wealth and magic items were just gated back to Nazarick. They've done this before in Riestes in season 2. They did similar things, and actually they're shown doing that in season 4 when they destroy Riestes. Aura goes to one of their treasuries and steals a bunch of magic items. But after this little description's given in the epilogue, we immediately jump to the scene with Ainz leaving. And during this scene when they're saying goodbye, Ainz actually makes a comment about like, oh, you're rebuilding, it will be difficult, but I wish you the best of luck. And he even says like under his breath, like, I could have convinced them to leave more. So that pretty much confirms that Nazarick was the one who like took all the wealth out of the Robo Holy Kingdom. A small little thing that happens in this scene that I think is actually pretty important, that was omitted from the movie, is Ainz actually offers to resurrect Nea's parents in this scene before he leaves. He asks her verbatim, like, would you like me to reward you for your service by resurrecting your parents. Her mom was killed in the battle in the capital that happened like early on in the war. She heard about that from a prisoner, but Nea actually declines the offer from Ainz. She says like, oh, you've given me too much. That would be too much to ask of you, your majesty. I appreciate you offering, but I can't accept. So then Ainz leaves, and that is the last we see of Nea Braha as she cheers for the Sorcerer King and like leads some cheers amongst her followers as Ainz is being led out of the city. So then in the movie, we cut to the scene between Caspon and Demiurge. In the light novel, the next scene is actually between Ainz and Shizu in the carriage. This scene was in the movie, but it's very, very short in the movie. It's a little bit longer in the light novel. Ainz asks how Shizu did, like, oh, this was your first time like out of Nazarick, you were on your own, you didn't have like a lot of instructions, like how was it? And Shizu's like, oh, it was really hard, like I really wish I had more detailed instructions. And Ainz is like in his head like just like, yep, I wish that sometimes too, like because Demiurge is always just like, oh, just do what you think is best, Lord Ainz. And he hates that. He hates it when you know, the NPCs tell him to just do what he thinks is best. He wants like very specific instructions on what to do. And then he asks her about Nea, and Shizu is just like, oh yes, like she's my friend. And Ainz gets so happy hearing that, his emotional suppression kicks in, and he says he's annoyed by that. That would have been a nice little thing to show in the movie, you know, just like, oh, she says she's my friend, and then just show that little green aura. That's all you needed to do in the movie. I think that would have added just a little something. It's a little something, you know, I'm nitpicking here. And actually in this section, because we're in Ainz's internal dialogue, we learn that the only reason he even offered to resurrect Nea's parents is because she became close with Shizu. Like that's the entire reason. He wouldn't have offered it otherwise. And he's actually glad that she didn't accept, because he was going to make a special exception for Shizu's friend, but he still thought it would be a pain because number one, the bodies weren't locatable, which he said wasn't impossible, but was a pain. And also he was worried that other people would like be asking for resurrection and stuff, and also resurrection wands were rare, so he didn't want to just use them a bunch, because Ainz actually has to use wands for resurrection. He's unable to cast resurrection magic like without items. He has to use items for it, and they have limited number of uses. And there's this cute little conversation where he even says like, I'll set up a vacation system so you can come and visit Nea whenever you want. And Shizu's like, oh, this place is really far. And he's like, oh, don't worry, like I'll set up a gate for you to come visit, and you guys can hang out whenever you want. He's like very much encouraging this friendship amongst like, you know, the New World people. Like he's just very, very happy that someone has been able to make a friend outside of Nazarick. And he thinks in his mind, like, I think it's important to maybe get the NPCs to branch out and meet people. And he says specifically he wants that for Aura and Mare, which eventually leads us into the events of volumes 15 and 16 with the half-elf Godkin arc. And then the last line of the scene, of course, is talking about like, oh, was anyone interested in rune weapons? And Cece's just answer is, I tried my best. And she says that like multiple times, like, because he keeps like asking her like, oh, are you sure? Did anyone say anything? I tried my best. And it's just, and as we all know, rune weapons trademark did not get the promotion that they needed for this arc, which was one of the side projects of this arc for Ainz. So then we have the final scene of the light novel, which is the second to last scene in the movie. Caspon has basically secured his spot as Holy King. He's gonna be coronated soon, and that's when Demiurge shows up. The scene is basically the same, but I just wanted to comment on this scene because some people apparently were a little confused as to what the heck was going on. So in the movie, before it shifts to the closing, it shows you a flash of the doppelganger face, in case anyone doesn't know. So I actually saw that some people online thought that was Pandora's actor. It was not Pandora's actor. It was just a regular greater doppelganger. Probably would have been given away that it wasn't Pandora's actor because he bowed to Demiurge, which the real Pandora's actor wouldn't do because they're kind of equivalent. But it does look like Pandora's actor, so I don't blame them for, you know, thinking it is. It could have been him. They look exactly the same, so I don't blame them. So the real Caspon has been dead this whole time. Like everything with Caspon in volume 12 and 13 has all been this doppelganger impersonating Caspon. And I mentioned in one of the cut contents for volume 12 that there was a scene with Ainz where he mentions talking to the greater doppelganger, but he doesn't mention the greater doppelganger's appearance. And it also explains all these little kind of small things going on with Caspon that like you don't really notice unless you know that Caspon is the doppelganger. It makes for an interesting reread once you know Caspon is the doppelganger, because then you're able to pick out all the little things that kind of give it away that something's wrong with Caspon. How he kind of stumbles over his words and does kind of these illogical things that don't seem to be that good for the Holy Kingdom. Like they seem to be trying to help out the Sorcerer Kingdom a little bit more. He makes some decisions that he doesn't really have justification for and things like that. All these things at the time don't make sense because we're missing so much context. But then once you find out it's an impersonator, all this stuff suddenly makes sense. So that was a very interesting, thing to kind of sprinkle throughout these books is just Caspon's kind of like people noticing that his demeanor is kind of off and he's acting a little strange, and then like just revealing right at the end like, oh, it was a fake the entire time. It was a plant from Nazarick. I just thought that was a brilliant way to structure the story. Before we wrap up, guys, I did want to talk about something that you get, some extra information you get in the light novel, and I'm doing this because I think it's interesting. I've mentioned in my other cut content breakdowns that at the end of the light novel volumes, we get these character sheets that kind of have stat breakdowns for some of the characters. So Nea actually got 2 character sheets. She gets one at the end of volume 12 and one at the end of this volume, volume 13. And the reason for that is explained by Maruyama here, and I want to read it to you guys. Nea has changed so much that she gets another introduction. She died and lost levels, but at the same time, she survived the war and leveled up. Her class build isn't very efficient due to swapping out Servant and so on, but it's a reflection of her many experiences, so it can't be helped. Nea herself doesn't realize she's using skills to influence people's thinking and brainwash them. Her powers are still effective only on those with mental scars. Those sorts of people feel saved by her words. And it goes on to explain her class levels are 2 levels in Paladin, 3 levels in Sacred Archer, 2 levels in Evangelist, and 4 levels in Founder. In her first character sheet, she only had levels in Archer and Servant. So her class makeup has completely changed, and it's because she died and was resurrected and gained levels because of her fights in throughout this story. This also goes to show you why she's been able to have so much success with her speeches and stuff. Is she's actually brainwashing people. Like her class skills that she's acquired from wanting to make this organization and wanting to convert people, her desires have manifested in the form of class skills that she is using subconsciously to brainwash people into her organization. So basically her entire organization is just people that have been brainwashed to worship the Sorcerer King, and I just think that's incredible. I like that is just such once again a huge big revelation here. I also kind of think that Nea is a bit of a tragic character. In a lot of ways, she's one of the biggest victims of the Sorcerer Kingdom and like the plans of the NPCs. All the misery that she's endured, the death of her parents, the death of her family, the destruction of her home, like all of this stuff was caused by the person she admires. So even though Nea has, been able to rebuild somewhat of a life for herself by the end of this volume, her life was basically completely destroyed, and her family was completely destroyed by Ainz. So, and she's just completely unaware of this fact. So in that way, I do kind of view her as like one of the biggest victims of this whole thing. Is like she literally has just fallen into this trap of worshiping the being that caused all her suffering. It's kind of this weird cyclical thing here, and that's just another very interesting like storytelling perspective, like just an interesting character. And I've said this before, it's just how Maruyama has this way of just taking a single person from the New World and making them this massive part of the story and like just spiraling things. I just love that about Overlord, and just how you can get this invested and think this much about a character that you only know for one part of the story, and like I just don't know. It's awesome. That ends Overlord, the Sacred Kingdom cut content. I can't believe it. I can't believe we actually got through it all. We actually got through it all, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have, and I know I've criticized the movie before, guys, and for good reason. The movie does have some areas where it certainly could have improved, and I don't think my criticisms were unfounded, and people that have criticized the movie, I don't think their criticisms are unfounded too. There's plenty of areas that the movie could have improved on, or it would have been better if they had more time and converted it into a series. But at the end of the day, guys, I still found the movie very enjoyable. I mean, I've watched it like 3 times now, and I wouldn't do that if I didn't find it enjoyable. And so while the movie has its faults, I'm still just glad it exists. And once again, guys, I'm super glad that anyone even cares what I have to say. It really is just so fun for me to go on these rants and talk to you guys about these things that I'm really passionate about. And you guys know I get lost in the sauce sometimes. I can just keep rambling on forever about these weird tangents because I'm a freak. But I appreciate you all for watching, and I hope you continue to do so as I continue to break down season 2. So guys, what did you think of this part of the Sacred Kingdom cut content? What did you think of our series as a whole? What are your thoughts on the movie? Everything related to the Sacred Kingdom. I want to hear from you guys. Leave it in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please like the videos, let me know. And if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out more than you know. It'll let you know when I post in the future. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video. I will see you all next time. Bye.